लास्ट क्लास से इस क्लास के बीच में काफ़ी चीज़ें हो गई हैं. रिजल्ट्स आ गए, न्यू टॉपर्स आर नाउ हियर. हिस्ट्री का रिजल्ट काफ़ी अच्छा है इस बार. लॉट्स ऑफ टॉपर्स हैव इमर्ज्ड. एनीवे, अभी टॉपर्स को छोड़ देते हैं कुछ दिन, है ना, बिकॉज एक बार सिलेक्शन होता है 2-4 दिन तो जिंदगी जीने दो. Then we'll call them for their strategies. Anyway, many of them have cleared with flying marks. Many people who are getting around 270, 280, कुछ marks से selection रह गया है उनका. They have also calling me from last 1 week. सर क्या करें क्या ना करें. जिंदगी में एक टाइम आता है ना, existential crisis. Once you appear in the interview, feel like हो गया है. अब तो फॉर्मेलिटी बची है लिस्ट में नाम आने के लिए, बट नेचुरली कुछ का तो रहना ही है. दिस इज हाउ द एग्जाम इज. तो करेंगे उनके लिए भी मेहनत फिर से. बट एनीवे, वी वर डिस्कसिंग अबाउट एनसीईआरटीज. ओके, एक बार जल्दी से रिकैप कर लेते हैं व्हाट वी हैव कवर्ड इन एंशिएंट इंडिया सो फार, और अभी आज से हम क्या स्टार्ट करने वाले हैं. तो एंशिएंट इंडिया में अभी तक हमने रफली वी हैव डिस्कस्ड अबाउट द मीनिंग ऑफ सोर्सेस. We have discussed about what is the meaning of literary sources, what is the importance of archaeology in understanding Indian history. Then we have covered the initial phase of history known as Stone Age. Within Stone Age, 3 different parts are there, which includes Paleolithic, Mesolithic and Neolithic. These 3 parts we have covered along with their features. Then after that, we have covered the phase of Harappan civilization. हमने थोड़ा सा बाहर वाली सिविलाइजेशन को भी कवर किया था. आई होप ऑल ऑफ यू रिमेंबर. इजिप्ट, चाइनीज थोड़ा डिस्कस किया था उन सब के बारे में, मेसोपोटामियन. एनीवे, वो इसलिए किया था ताकि आपको क्रॉस कल्चरल अंडरस्टैंडिंग बन जाए. देन आफ्टर दैट इन द प्रीवियस क्लास वी हैव गिवन कंप्लीट वेटेज टू ओनली वन टॉपिक, दैट इज द अर्ली वैदिक एंड द लेटर वैदिक एज. वो हमने कवर किया था. टुडे वी आर गोइंग टू स्टार्ट विद सम मोर इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स. एंड इफ वी सी फ्रॉम एग्जाम पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, मैं आपको एग्जाम पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू इसलिए समझा रहा हूँ. देखो कि फाइनली जब सिलेक्शन होता है ना, तो हर किसी को एक ही चीज समझ में आती है, मैंने क्या चीज सही करी और क्या चीज गलत. तो सही करने का मतलब पता क्या होता है? एक क्वेश्चन हमेशा कहां से आता है? सोर्सेस से आता है. एक क्वेश्चन एवरी ईयर इज गोइंग टू कम फ्रॉम हड़प्पन सिविलाइजेशन एंड वन क्वेश्चन विल ऑलवेज कम फ्रॉम वैदिक एज. दिस इज फिक्स. मतलब हमारा सिलेबस फिक्स्ड है. हमें अननेसेसरली चीजों पे ध्यान नहीं देना, बस ये देखना है जो हम पढ़ रहे हैं उसका रेलेवेंस क्या है. नाउ टुडे वी आर गोइंग टू स्टार्ट फ्रॉम 6th century BC. We had previously discussed that the Vedic period, its time period is from 15 to 6th century BC. ये इसका टाइम पीरियड है. अब हम यहाँ से स्टार्ट करेंगे. 6th century BC is very very important in Indian history. Not only Indian history, in fact the whole of world history. पूरी ancient world history में बहुत important है. उसके कुछ specific reasons हैं. Okay, like number 1, this is the age of intellectual revolution. Please remember this word, intellectual revolution. Some new thoughts, new ideas are going to be on the scene of the human life, and eventually in case of India there were around 62 sects which emerged around 6th century BC. और सबसे ज्यादा important है Buddhism and Jainism. So this is an intellectual revolution where people are now trying to come up with new understanding of human existence, and this existence can be explained in multiple ways. Okay, we'll discuss about them today. Second, this is also again very important because in India I will see state formation. When we were discussing early Vedic period and later Vedic period, हम एक चीज पे फोकस कर रहे थे that during the early Vedic period these people were nomads. There was no concept of state. By the later Vedic period some ideas of state emerged, but it was not fully evolved. जो state के 4 specific characteristics होते हैं, we should be aware about it: people, territory, government and sovereignty. These 4 are, when they come together, they are known as state. So this 6th century BC is again very important for India, and during this time we'll see rise of 16 states which are known as famously Mahajanapadas. This is very very important. Every year UPSC asks one question from Buddhism and Jainism, and the next question which you always understand, it's about state formation. This state formation is going to reach its epitome, उसकी highest wavelength पे जब वो match करेगा, that is known as the Maurya. It starts from the Magadha and it is the Mauryas, and within Mauryas we have one famous king, and that king is Ashoka. Every year we are getting one question from Mauryas. हर साल एक question वहां से आता है. ठीक है, तो जो भी हम आज पढ़ने वाले हैं, इट इज मोर अबाउट अंडरस्टैंडिंग दोज एरियाज व्हिच आर वेरी वेरी क्रूशियल फॉर आवर एग्जाम. तो चलिए स्टार्ट करते हैं. These two are the most notable achievement, but other than that also we have some more achievements. Like in India, this is the phase where we again see the emergence of script. Okay, script is going to come back, and this time decipherable है ना, हड़प्पन्स वाली नहीं कि लिख के चले गए पता नहीं चल रहा क्या लिख के गए हो. Now deciphered script will be there. We'll see the introduction of coins. So monetization of economy, trade and commerce is going to emerge from this time onwards, and with this again we'll see the rise of trade organizations. These trade organizations are known as guilds. Okay, so we'll see the rise of Indian economy. Indian economy जिसको हम बात करते हैं, इसकी सबसे जो basic foundation है, it starts from 6th century BC. Look, every economy requires circulation of coins. Without that, trade and commerce cannot increase to very high level. Okay, so from this time onwards we'll see the rise of coinage in Indian economy. All right, so all these are the important parts which we will discuss today. Let us start. इस पर बड़ा ध्यान देंगे because these are very very important topics. All right, and as we have discussed previously, whenever we discuss any topic, the first thing we discuss about is sources, कि हमें information कहाँ से मिलती है. So let us try to understand. So if we see 6th century BC, there are certain areas of information that we have with us. Okay, till the Vedic period we were only having the Vedas. सिर्फ Vedas था हमारे पास as a literary source. We were not having any other religion which can provide us some different kind of information. But this thing is going to change from now onwards. So most importantly, we'll see the introduction of Buddhist text. Buddhist texts are going to provide us a lot of information. Second, we also have the Jaina text from this time onward. Jaina texts or the sacred texts, they're known as agamas, they're also known as siddhantas. We'll talk about them later, but anyway, please try to understand Buddhist and Jaina sources are going to become very important for the understanding of 6th century BCE. Okay, so these two sources are going to add up. Along with that, the multiple chronological layers of Mahabharata and Ramayana. There is not one single story in Ramayana and Mahabharata. There are a large number of stories that we have, and they also provide us some information starting from 6th century BC. Then some of the foreign sources are also going to provide us information. We have various Greek historians. The most famous of them is Herodotus. Okay, so he wrote about India. He provided information about us, but the more important information later on, it will emerge from the writings of Arrian, Strabo, Pliny. All these personalities are going to provide us information. Okay, so that's why literary sources are going to widen up from 6th century BC. And one more important thing, this is the time of the emergence of script. So previously, whatever which was more of like the sayings of the mouth, they are now going to transfer into specific texts. So this is why literary sources are going to become very important from 6th century BC onward. Side by side, we also have certain archaeological evidences, and these archaeological evidences are very important because they help us in understanding about the progress which has been made by the humankind. Like we have discussed during the later Vedic period, we see the beginning of the rise of iron. Iron age start hota hai, but that iron age will take a major shape with the coming of 6th century BC. Iron objects like hoes, sickles, knives, tools, etc. are going to be utilized on larger scale, and then along with this, various kinds of art and craft, including textile, beads, pottery, etc. They are also going to provide us information. The signature pottery of this time. What is the signature pottery of these times? North black polished ware, NBPW. That will be seen in multiple places from this time onwards. So please remember, whenever we discuss about 6th century BC, we have literary sources also as well as archaeological sources. This is perhaps the first phase of Indian history where we have both at the same time. Okay, this is the first phase because majority for the Vedic period we do not have the archaeological sources. For the Harappans we were not having the literary sources. So that's why this is the first phase of history, and that's why please try to understand that whenever the nature of sources changes, because this is a change of nature of sources, right? And this allows us to have one of the most important point of any part of history, and that is what is known as corroboration कि दो अगर sources same information provide करते हैं, that means that our doubts over the historical events are now going to subside because same information हमें दोनों से मिलने वाली है. Okay, so that's why please understand the nature of sources from 6th century onwards. They are going to become diversified. They are going to provide us more important information about the overall changes in the historical realms. Alright, so please remember, sources are now widening for us. Plus, with the coming of the script, written sources are going to become very important. Now, before understanding any of these important events with respect to Buddhism, Jainism, state formation, one thing is very, very important, and that is the role of agriculture. Look, surplus, it's always dependent upon agriculture. Without that surplus, people will not have the convenience of leaving away their primary occupation and shifting towards something else. है ना कि अगर खाने को ही नहीं है, eventually you are going to be stuck. You have to participate only in agriculture. So this is a time phase where we see the development in the Middle Gangetic Valley. Wet rice cultivation began to yield more produce, and whenever we have surplus is the first requirement of the process of state formation. State तभी बनेगा जब उसके पास extra resources आ सकते हैं through the process of taxation. But how will you impose tax when the people are not having any kind of surplus? So since the surplus started from this time onwards, this was a very important achievement for the 6th century. Then whenever we talk about 6th century BC, there is a kind of debate among the various historians. Some of the historians who are from Marxist school, they say that 6th century BC saw a lot of progress because of the use of iron. Okay, that's the debate that we have with respect to 6th century BC. While other schools, including subaltern and others, they criticize it, that too much reliance, too much emphasis has been made on the role of iron. Okay, iron, as we have previously discussed, in case of North India, roughly from 1000 BC, we see the use of iron. In case of South India, it starts a little bit early, around 1100 BC. In North India, we have places like Lahore Deva. In South India, we have places like Halur. Halur is a very important place for that. So these Marxists, as all of us understand, Marxist का main realm क्या होता है? What do they believe in? They believe that economic factors are responsible for shaping the history, and since iron is a part of an economic factor, they have given too much of reliance towards iron, and that creates the classic debate कि what is the role of iron in Indian history. Again, ये historiography NCERT में mention है, अभी इसको थोड़ा सा discuss करेंगे. Now, the impact of iron technology is better understood, okay, if we consider, please इसको एक लाइन को पढ़ना अच्छे से, लेकिन उन्होंने मेंशन किया हुआ है, the technical changes which with the introduction of iron implements would have brought about in various craft activities. There are two debates. One debate talks about the role of iron in agriculture, कि agriculture में क्या changes किया. Okay, these Marxists, they say that the ground was cleared with the use of iron, and second, even the implements, जैसे कि हम plowshare की बात करते हैं, हल जो चलाते हैं, ठीक है, that was now also made of iron, which allows us to have better agricultural practices. This is the first thing that they say. Second, they talk about the role of iron in various kinds of other art and craft activities. So NCERTs में देखो थोड़ा सा उस लेवल पे बातें नहीं की हुई हैं जो हमें चाहिए ऑप्शनल के लिए, बट what they have cleared out कि even though the first debate remains problematic, कितना रोल रहा होगा in the rise of agriculture, but their role in the production of various kinds of art and craft, that is very clear. वो बहुत clear है. इस डिबेट के अंदर 3-4 हिस्टोरियंस पार्टिसिपेट करते हैं, ठीक है. डीडी कोसंबी, one of the most finest historian of India, he says that the movement of Indo-Aryan toward the east, it was aimed at accessing the iron ore of South Bihar. South Bihar, as all of us know, Jharkhand area. Jharkhand area, it is very prominent for iron. Okay, gaining a near monopoly over it, the iron was responsible for the political dominance attained by the state of Magadha. Now this viewpoint, it's a bit controversial. Okay, कि सिर्फ जो movement है वो किस वजह से आ रही है? Because of iron resources. This was further supported by R.S. Sharma, one of the disciples of the same school. So R.S. Sharma said iron axes and iron plows led to expansion of area under cultivation in the Ganges Valley. Now eventually this was going to be countered by Makhanlal. So Makhanlal says that the use of iron axe and the iron plow facilitated clearing of forest and generation of agriculture surplus is a pure myth. Why it's a myth? Because he's saying that this area remained heavily forested till 16th and 17th century, and this area was eventually made used by the only the British during the times of the colonialism itself. इस एरिया को क्लियर किया गया था. And further the counter comes from Nihar Ranjan Ray as well as Amalnanda Ghosh, and both of them they say that the forests of Ganga region could have been cleared also by the use of fire. Iron was not a prerequisite for the rise of agriculture in this area. Agriculture could have progressed even by the use of fire. So this is a big debate that we have in history. Okay, conclusion जो है वो बाद में discuss करेंगे, अभी conclusion नहीं है, अभी बस ideas समझो that whenever we talk about 6th century BC, we have multiple historians and they say different kinds of things about the rise of agriculture, about the rise of various kingdoms. Like if we see D.D. Kosambi is directly linking the rise of Magadha with the rise of use of iron. उससे direct relation बना देते हैं. But that is something which is not very correct. Why? इसके ऊपर एक research किया गया. Research was that we'll see the use of iron at PGW level and we'll see the use of iron at NBPW level, है ना. तो roughly अगर 1000 BC पे कितना iron use हुआ है and 600 BC पे कितना iron use हुआ है, उसको compare करते हैं. If the percentage of iron is increasing, it means the use of iron is expanding. However, it is more or less same level. Since the use of iron is of same level across these 500 years, it means that iron did not single-handedly lead the second urbanization. Urbanization के लिए बहुत सारे factors साथ में आए. Political, economic, social, cultural. It was not just iron. Iron के ऊपर बहुत ज़्यादा emphasis Marxist history ने सिर्फ इसलिए किया है. They want their method of history writing to win over others. And यही history का सबसे बड़ा problem भी बन जाता है. That in order to justify your school of thought, आप कुछ भी बोल देंगे, आप कुछ भी उसको justify कर देंगे. And that is a very important part which we'll discuss later on in our optional classes. But अभी के लिए इतना समझ लो कि जो आयरन का रोल रहा है, okay, in the rise of 6th century BC various innovation, that is a bit limited. वो पूरा exactly 100% ऐसा नहीं है जैसे कि Marxist historians argue करते हैं. Even Upinder Singh comes up with a very good explanation on this, that technology, okay, technology, yes, it is important for a very big change in the human lives, but it can't be responsible for every change in human life. वो possible नहीं है उस चीज के लिए. उसके साथ में और भी factors होंगे, political, social, economic, cultural. Okay, let us see various examples in today's world. If we see Jharkhand, okay, Jharkhand, it is very rich in resources, but does that lead to very high level of development in that state? तो कैसे possible है? That's why whenever Marxist historians only focus on the resources, that is the biggest lie. See Africa. Africa has one of the highest level of resources in the world. Diamond वगैरह जाओ साउथ अफ्रीका में मिल जाता है, पेट्रोलियम भी बहुत है वहां पे, ठीक है. You go to different parts of Africa, one of the highest rich resource continent. But if you see the development of that whole continent, I would say it's the least developed continent among all the ones which are inhabited. Antarctica छोड़ देते हैं, but rest of them, it's one of the least. So only resources cannot be responsible for rise or development. इस चीज को हमें बहुत clearly समझना चाहिए. इनफैक्ट एक टर्म यूज होता है इकोनॉमी में, डच डिजीज, कि जिसके पास भी ज्यादा पैसा होता है वो ज्यादा फिर आगे जाके ज्यादा सर्वाइव नहीं कर पाता उसको, है ना. इफ यू इवेंचुअली डू नॉट क्रिएट द गवर्नेंस फ्रेमवर्क इन एनी कंट्री, इनिशियली यू मे बी रिच बट लेटर ऑन यू मे नॉट सर्वाइव. सी द एग्जांपल ऑफ मेसोपोटामिया आई गेव यू इन द प्रीवियस क्लास, है ना. मेसोपोटामिया, वन ऑफ द अर्लीस्ट प्लेस टू सी द बिगिनिंग ऑफ civilization in the whole of world, and see the state of Mesopotamia today. This is the Middle East we talk about, है ना, always affected by one or the other kind of factors. Anyway, PPT तो आप लोगों के साथ शेयर कर देंगे. अभी बहुत ज्यादा हिस्टोरियन व्यूज के अंदर नहीं घुसना, बस लॉजिक्स को समझो कि जब भी 6th century BC स्टार्ट होता है किन किन चीजों पे हम बात करेंगे in the future. And these are the areas which we're going to explore, and UPSC also asks questions from there. There's a topic in your ancient India, impact of iron technology in ancient India. आयरन का रोल क्या है ओवरऑल. तो आयरन का जब हम रोल की बात करेंगे, दिस इज द इनिशियल डिबेट ऑन द रोल ऑफ आयरन. नेचुरली द रोल ऑफ आयरन इज गोइंग टू एक्सपैंड and this was responsible for the rise of imperialism. This was responsible for the rise of the empires like Mauryas. That is something which we are talking about 3rd century BC. Let us now go into the other aspects. Whenever we talk about urbanization, right? Urbanization का हमने बात किया था even at the time of Harappan civilization. Let us have some understanding one more time. So whenever we talk about urbanization, we talk about number one thing is always agriculture surplus, which can shift you from the primary economic activities to the secondary economic activities. Then the growth of craft and trade, which is naturally linked with agriculture surplus. After that, we again see the growing population. Like we see, villages are always sparsely populated, while the urban area, they are very heavily populated. This is Delhi ka example lo, Delhi and Haryana. And Haryana is something is having more geographical territory, but the population of Delhi is more than Haryana. So that shows that larger areas mein Delhi sirf ek urban area hai. Emergence of towns in the Gangetic Plain, and eventually this is called second urbanization in history after the first urbanization evident in the Harappan civilization. So by 6th century BC, we again see the phase of second urbanization. Look, in Indian history, overall there are only 3 urbanization phases. The first is Harappan civilization, then we see the ruralization phase under the Vedic Aryans. Then again we see the second urbanization. This second urbanization is going to continue till 300 AD, and this is as per the research of R.S. Sharma. Then he says that the phase of de-urbanization begins in India. But the story is not that much clear. The important thing is by 300 AD, we see decline of some previous cities of second urbanization, but at the same time we do see rise of some cities from 300 AD onwards. However, the third phase of Indian urbanization, it starts with the coming of Turks, and that comes in 13th century AD. So 3 ही urbanization है. यूपीएससी में जब भी क्वेश्चंस आते हैं, एंशिएंट में आए चाहे मिडिएवल में आए, अर्बनाइजेशन के जो बेसिक्स है ना वो चेंज नहीं होंगे. It's always going to be same. It's always going to be same. You have to always remember that whenever urbanization is going to happen, it will have certain political factor, social factor, economic factor, as well as technological factors. All the factors are going to come together, and then only we'll have a phase of urbanization. After this third urbanization phase, we have never seen any higher level of de-urbanization in any phase of India. Okay, वो कभी हमने ऐसा देखी नहीं है. Even during the medieval times, India's urbanization was around 15%, which was more than medieval Europe. I hope you know about many of the travelers like Ibn Battuta who came to India, and they have given the cross-cultural comparison also. Like India as a city, Delhi as a city was second to none in the world. And during the time of Mughals, Agra developed as a very important center. So urbanization is something which was natural in India, and in India it happened on multiple occasions. Why? Because we were having agricultural surplus. That's the most important thing. Okay, why India has been seen as one of the mother of the civilization in the world? The reason is our agriculture has always been very strong. Okay, आज तो चलो ठीक है, technologically we are not comparable to USA, China in terms of agriculture, but in the previous times, yes, we were having 2 to 3 crops in the various regions of India, in which Europe was only one crop. वहाँ मोस्टली एक ही क्रॉप होता था साल में. हमारा रबी खरीफ तो बहुत पहले से चल रहा है, और ज़ैद सीजन को मिला ले जिसमें हम फ्रूट्स वेजिटेबल्स वगैरह भी ग्रो करते हैं, तो इट बिकम्स 3 seasons, 2 full fledged and 1 in between. That's why agriculture surplus has played a very important role in India's economic history. Now, whenever towns emerge in any part of the world, okay, they have certain characteristics. A town could be political and administrative center, like Delhi. Delhi is more of a political and administrative center, right? In those times, when you talk about 6th century BC, we see rise of Rajgriha, or what is the other name of Rajgriha? Huh? Yes, Rajgir, Shravasti, Kaushambi, or majority of the capitals of the 16 Mahajanapadas. They were more like political and administrative centers. Some would be the centers of trade and commerce, like India ki capital Delhi hai, but if you talk about commercial capital, that is Mumbai, right? So in those times, if we see Ujjain, why Ujjain is important? Because Ujjain was linking the Uttarpatha with Dakshinapatha. 2 major trade routes were there, and Uttarpatha and Dakshinapatha, and Ujjain was a epicenter which was connecting both of them. Similarly, we also had Takshila. Takshila was connecting India with Central Asia, so it played a very important role in the Silk Route also later on, and holy centers like that of Vaishali. Okay, so whenever urbanization happens, it could be of different colors. It could be an administrative center, it could be a military center, it could be a commercial center, or it could be even holy center or any religious center. Like आज की डेट में religious center का बात करें, just creating Ram temple, okay, has converted Ayodhya, okay, it has converted Ayodhya into a holy center for tourism. Previously also it was recognized as the birthplace of Lord Ram, but the moment the temple got created, this is now going to shift it into completely different. So that is why whenever we see any major change, जैसे पहले कलकत्ता कैपिटल था, okay, under the British, the moment it was shifted to Delhi, तो दिल्ली का कुछ लेना देना था ही नहीं. Delhi was not something which was very important in the time of early 19th century, but the moment by 20th century the capital was shifted, again it became a very major political and administrative center. So we have to always remember, जब भी urbanization होगा, it's going to create different set of towns. Now when we talk about fundamentals कि urban areas को हम identify किस तरीके से करते हैं, तो आज अगर आज का हम बात करें तो 75% of the people should be non agricultural activities, हम उसका बात करते हैं. More than 400 should be the density, है ना. इस तरीके के हम फैक्टर्स निकालते हैं, बट एंशिएंट इंडिया में ये सब हम अप्लाई नहीं कर सकते because that urbanization was of different level. Like we talk about pottery, NBPW pottery is found in urban center. Second, we see these various cities or towns, they were fortified. That's again a feature of urbanization of earlier times. Third, the houses were either made of mud bricks, in some cases they were also made of burnt bricks, so that is a bit different from the other areas. Facilities is something which is very, very important. In general, the facilities provided in the urban area, they are more than rural area. This education हो गया आज की डेट में, but in those times we're talking about drains, ring wells, soak pits, etc. That's why these were some of the urban features. Why you should remember them? हर साल एक क्वेश्चन इकोनॉमिक हिस्ट्री के ऊपर आता है which is very close to urbanization. तो आपको पता होना चाहिए what are the major features of any urban area, okay, during the early times of ancient India, and even they are going to continue later on also. कुछ features of same रहेंगे. Plus, whenever we talk about urbanization, please remember, along with urbanization, we see literate people. Okay, we see the coming of script. Okay, there are also major trade centers. So all these are the features of urban areas. तो ये सब आप याद रखेंगे at least at the idea level. Now we're talking about a term. Previously we had discussed that during the early Vedic period, we see the big development of the concept of jana or people. Okay. By later Vedic period, Jana turned itself into Janapada. The concept of state or Rashtra, the concept of Rashtra emerged for the first time, and eventually we see the rise of Mahajanapadas. So now we are going to talk about what is the meaning of this Mahajanapada. Meaning क्या होता है इसका, क्या क्या फीचर्स इसके साथ लिंक्ड होते हैं. ठीक है, कभी भी देखो ऐसे क्वेश्चंस आते हैं, अगर आपको अपनी कंसेप्चुअल क्लैरिटी बहुत हायर लेवल पे लेके जानी है तो छोटी छोटी चीजें आपको पता होनी चाहिए. जितना अच्छे से आपको पता होगी इवेंचुअली उतना ही अच्छा आप आंसर्स को लिख पाओगे. ओके, सो लेट अस सी, दिस इज द फेज ऑफ लेटर वैदिक पीरियड 1000 to 600 BC, and what do we see during this time? Transition from tribal structure based on lineage to territorial states. This is the first feature. These are now territorial states. They are not lineage based, है ना, चाचा मामा के हिसाब से नहीं चलेंगे अभी. Now they are going to be proper kingship. King is going to emerge. Okay. Second, Janas or the tribe, they migrated eastward and settled in specific regions. So उन्होंने अपने एक specific region बना लिया. Shifting loyalty, focus of loyalty shifting from tribe to territory, and then eventually Janapada, which literally means the place where the tribe set its foot upon. इसका exact meaning यही होता है. Okay. Pada means foot, Jana means people. So wherever they put their foot, that concept is known as Janapada. Then through competition and consolidation, the warfare within this Janapada eventually was responsible for the rise of Mahajanapada. They were able to capture one another depending upon their capabilities in the military warfare, and that's how stronger Janapadas expanded, incorporating the other Janas. Okay, and plus important, what is the characteristics of a state? Territory, population, government, and sovereignty. Please remember these four important points. Okay, whenever we talk about that during which phase India see emergence of a state, it's a debate. अभी मैं आपको बहुत ज़्यादा historians से bombard नहीं करने वाला, but there are some historians like Kumkum Roy who says कि जो स्टेट फॉर्मेशन है महाजनपदा में नहीं हुआ था, लेटर फेज ऑफ लेटर वैदिक पीरियड में हुआ था। तो वो सब पे भी बात नहीं करेंगे, बट यू शुड एटलीस्ट नो whenever somebody calls India as a state, India has 4 specific feature. Okay, within this the most important thing, it is about government. If government is on the weaker side, if government is not having elaborate functions, naturally it's going to affect its sovereignty. And this is the reason, like when tomorrow we'll discuss about Cholas, Cheras, Pandyas, South India की theme कल हम pick करने वाले हैं, तो वहां पे हम concept of state use नहीं करते. Okay, why? These we use the word like chiefdoms. Why we use the word chiefdom? Because the government was not in a evolved form. Like see today's government has very elaborate ministries, है ना, 50-60 ministries है जिनके अंदर बहुत सारे departments हैं. Under department there are different kinds of functions has been given to them, and eventually they are responsible for the overall machinery of India. So government in today's time, it is very elaborate, but in those times, like when we discuss about early Vedic period, government was having very few functions. 2-3 functions थे, 4-5 functionaries थे उनके, इतना ही काम चल रहा था हर ट्राइब के लेवल पे. But now this is going to become complex. Okay, and that's why the formation of state is a very major achievement in the life of humankind. Why? Because through this we use the instrument of state to ensure peace and development in the long run. However, in those times concept of state was different. It's not like today. Today we talk about welfare state, today we talk about paternal state. In those times such was not different kind of notions. However, there is one major outlier, and that is the person Ashoka, because Ashoka was the one who changed his nature of state. है ना, वो एक बहुत बड़ा example है, but we'll talk about that later on. Features of Mahajanapadas, ये भी आपको एक basic level पे पता होना चाहिए. Number 1, they are territorial kingdom. Second, they are trying to centralize the administration. We'll have a debate on this later on. What is the meaning of centralization? What is the meaning of decentralization? To what extent these kingdoms could have ensured centralization? That is also a big debate. Why? Because आज की तरह नहीं है यार कि मतलब एक कॉल किया पीएमओ से और काम हो गया, है ना, सेंट्रलाइजेशन, या व्हाट्सएप पे ग्रुप बना के बैठे हैं सारे ऑफिसर्स कि हमारे एरिया में काम हो गया, काम खत्म. This is not how it used to be. For even small communication from place A to B, it required humongous time. है ना, और अगर आपको मान लो आना है मगधा से जाना है कर्नाटका, है ना, घोड़ा लेके चले हो ना, तो इट्स गोइंग टू टेक टाइम. सो सेंट्रलाइजेशन ऑफ टुडेज लेवल वाज नेवर पॉसिबल इन द प्रीवियस टाइम्स. इसको कभी भी मत अज्यूम करना कि पहले बहुत सेंट्रलाइजेशन था. नो, सेंट्रलाइजेशन इज ऑलवेज गोइंग टू इंक्रीज विद द यूज ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी, विद द यूज ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन नेटवर्क. और ये दो बहुत बड़े रीजंस हैं. दैट्स व्हाई वी डू नॉट कंसीडर इवन मौर्यास एज सेंट्रलाइज्ड टुडे, कि भाई सेंट्रलाइज्ड नहीं था मौर्य, even though they were having a very elaborate setup of the machinery, ना कि उनके पास 27 अध्यक्षास थे to control various parts of economy as well as military, but still we consider as not that centralized. So जब हम word centralized use करते हैं, NCERTs में ज्यादा ध्यान नहीं दिया था उसके eventual debate की तरफ. That's why word आप pick कर लो centralized, but eventually अगर इसके ऊपर कोई debate आ जाता है तो आपको तरीके से उसको refine करके लिखना पड़ता है, which we'll learn later on. Sovereign ruler, yes, eventually there's going to be a sovereign ruler. Taxation and redistribution, very, very important. Okay, please try to understand. This is one of the foremost work of a state. What is the foremost work of a state? That they get the resources from their people with the use of taxation, and then eventually the resources which have been utilized, they will be redistributed. Okay, they will have some welfare functions, they will go for some public works. So that's why eventually the features of Mahajanapada becomes very, very important. And finally, maintaining law and order. Without this, no state is going to exist. Okay, on daily basis, if there is law and order problem, that state is not going to exist. See Iraq, see Syria. What's the state of law and order? They are not going to exist for a longer time. If that is going to continue, the state of civil war. Like see the case of Myanmar, our neighbor. आज पढ़ा होगा न्यूज में 50% ऑफ टेरिटरी ऑफ म्यांमार इज नाउ अंडर द कंट्रोल ऑफ द आर्म्ड इंसर्क्टर्स, है ना, उनके कंट्रोल में आ चुका है. सो व्हेनेवर लॉ एंड ऑर्डर इज गोइंग टू गो डाउन, द स्टेट सिस्टम इज बाउंड टू कोलैप्स. दैट्स व्हाई इट्स वन ऑफ द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट ड्यूटी ऑफ द स्टेट टू मेंटेन लॉ एंड ऑर्डर. सो सपोज इफ यूपीएससी आस्क यू अ बेसिक क्वेश्चन, कभी पूछ ले कि क्रिटिकली इवैल्यूएट द वेरियस फीचर्स ऑफ महाजनपदास ऑफ 6th century BC, so you should at least know these 5-6 points. इसके ऊपर हम और एग्जांपल्स बाद में ऐड कर सकते हैं, बट एसेंशियली व्हाट आर द फीचर्स ऑफ अ महाजनपदा यू शुड बी अवेयर अबाउट, पता होना चाहिए. एंड एज वी ऑल ऑफ यू ऑलरेडी स्टडी, these Mahajanpada were essentially a state. तो ये चार पार्ट हमेशा साथ में चलेंगे, टेरिटरी, पॉपुलेशन, गवर्नमेंट एंड सॉवरेंटी. This is the introduction of the 6th century BC. Now we are going to go more into the various aspects of 6th century BC. I hope all of you are aware about 16 Mahajanapadas. Different set of lists have been given by Buddhist sources, Jaina sources, and some of the Hindu sources also. I'm using the word Hindu, but in those times the word Hindu was not that much popular. Okay, in those times more popular word, they were either Vedic or they were Puranic Hinduism. Okay, so anyway, the various sources that we have of the ancient India, they mention roughly 16 Mahajanapadas, starting all the way from the northwest, where we have the areas like Kamboj and Gandhara. In the south, we have the places like Ashmaka, and the easternmost it was Anga. Okay, so this was the area, and majority of the Mahajanapadas, they were in the northern part of India. Okay, they were not in the southern part. Why they were not in the southern part? It does not mean that any form of government was not existing in the South India. The only thing that we need to conclude from this is state system was not evolved in South India. All those four factors, people, territory, government and sovereignty, and most importantly sovereignty. Okay, if the government is not able to use its sovereignty on its territory, eventually it is not self-sufficient. तो वो problems South India में था उस time पे. North was mostly transiting towards a state system. If we see these 16 Mahajanapadas, roughly we can see their names like we have Gandhara, Kamboj, Ashmaka or Asaka, Vatsa, Avanti, Surasena, Chedi, Malla, Kuru, Panchal, Matsya, Vajji, Anga, Kashi, Koshal as well as Magdas. And now when we talk about 16 Mahajanapadas, some of them they were monarchies, some of them they were Gana Sanghas. Gana Sangha is a word which is utilized, which means that they were oligarchies. Okay, many historians they use the word republic. Okay, republic means the topmost person or the topmost citizen or the topmost ruler of the country is elected. That is the meaning of republic. Like in case of India, we have indirect election for the post of president. We do not have a direct one. जरूरत नहीं है उसके लिए, because we are a prime minister government. So naturally we are a republic. But if we see the case of Britain, Britain is a monarchy. Okay. In case of 6th century BC, Ganasangha is a more appropriate term. Don't use the word republic. Why we don't use the word republic? Why? Because the power it was concentrated in few Kshatriya families. तो oligarchy word ज़्यादा important होता है with respect to defining these some of the state system rather than using the word republic. But आज की डेट में देखो, the Greeks also say that they were having republics, but it's not like today's democracy. The kind of features of today's democracy and of 6th century BC can never be same. जैसे कि जिसमें सबसे first factor जो आता है, like whenever we say democracy, we use these simple words, the government of the people, for the people and by the people, of the people. Okay, but it's not always of the people in 6th century BC. Those who were powerful, they could always wrest power. Power को ले सकते हैं दूसरे लोगों से. Okay, by the people, it means that whenever there is going to be any major decision making, eventually people should be able to participate in that. But as all of us know, women were not part of the majority of the political systems of ancient India. So the first litmus test of a true democracy is always out. Second, with the development by 6th century BC, the development of the Varna order or the Varna system, again majority of the oligarchies, they were under the control of Kshatriya families. Like whenever we talk about Buddha, he belongs to Sakya clan. So this Sakya republic, the word we use, it was not more of a republic, it was more of a oligarchy, because some Kshatriyas, powerful Kshatriyas, they were controlling the governance process. तो ये भी हम डिबेट बाद में इसके ऊपर लेके चलेंगे, because UPSC ऐसे क्वेश्चन पूछता है एंशिएंट इंडिया में जो डायरेक्टली एनसीईआरटी में उनके बारे में ज्यादा बात कभी होगी नहीं. बट एनीवे, थोड़ा सा इनके बारे में बात कर लेते हैं कि इनके फीचर्स क्या क्या होते थे. व्हाट द डिफरेंस बिटवीन अ गना संघा एंड अ मोनार्की, उनके बीच में डिफरेंसेस क्या क्या हैं. लाइक नंबर 1, दे डिड नॉट कम अंडर द सिंगल डिसीजन मेकिंग authority. This is the first difference. Okay, in an oligarchy there used to be multiple people who used to sit together and they used to take the final decisions. Number one difference that we have. That's why later on Kautilya said कि अगर इन लोगों को खत्म करना है, if you want to finish off these oligarchies, the easiest method is to create dissension among themselves. उनके बीच में फूट डाल दो, खुद ही लड़ाई वड़ाई करके खत्म हो जाएंगे. It will be easy for us to then conquer them. This was the biggest limitation of Gana Sanghas. Number 1. Second, they were not having a standing army. Standing army का जो concept है, it was more in the case of monarchies. Here there used to be army, but that army only used to be summoned or they used to be called when there used to be any major fight. Standing army का concept नहीं था इनके में. तो ये दो बहुत बड़े differences हैं. Number 3 difference अगर आप बात करना चाहो, it's on the basis of geography. Majority of these oligarchies, they were around the foothills of Himalayas, while the majority of the major kingdoms or the monarchy, they were in the plains. वो plains में देखो हमेशा resources क्या होते हैं, ज़्यादा होते हैं. So that those resources can be utilized for having a full-time army, which is mostly not with the hill states. So these are the major differences. So let us see the different points also. The proto-states of Gangetic Valley, they were known as Janpadas and comprised of chiefdoms, republics as well as small kingdoms. Gana Sangha or oligarchy was centered on clans. Clans basis पे वो चलते थे. The Vrijis, like all of us know, Vriji were one of the best known Gana Sangha and Vaishali was the capital. Okay, they did not come under the single decision authority of a king, but decisions were taken on collective basis by the head of different clans together, and there were also smaller kingdoms such as Koshal and Kashi. Like in the case of Vaishali, 7,707 kings were there. 7,707 kings. इनसे कैसे डिसीजन ले लोगे? अगर हम बात करें मतलब पॉलिटिक्स की, जब हम बात करते थे कोएलिशन पॉलिटिक्स की कि 10-15 लोग आगे बात करेंगे, उनसे डिसीजन लिया नहीं जाता टाइम पे. एंड हियर देयर वर मोर देन 7,000. चलो ठीक है, मान लेते हैं कि इट कुड बी अ फिगर ऑफ स्पीच कि हर जितने भी सिटीजन होंगे सबको राजा बोल दिया खुश करने के लिए. बट नेचुरली अगर यहाँ पे 70 भी है, then also it's a very big problem because it's so difficult to take decisions when the decision making it is divided into different parts. तो कैसे लोगे डिसीजन, किस तरीके से हम डिसीजन लेंगे? तभी तो हम मतलब मोदी जी came for elections in 2014, है ना? He said that because of the coalition politics India has went behind by 50 years, right? Why? Because coalition politics में decision लेगा हमेशा क्या होता है, difficult होता है. And that is a kind of system which was possible in the case of Gana Sanghas. And they were also smaller kingdoms such as Koshla and Kashi. Smaller थे because majority of them, they were in the foothills of Himalayas and they were not having any kind of major resource revenues. Because देखो major resources कहाँ से आते हैं? If we see in the case of ancient India as well as medieval India, the number one is going to come from agriculture. Agriculture was the mainstay. Industrial revolution is of 18th century. Before that everything, every resource, it was dependent upon agriculture. अगर एग्रीकल्चर अब कहाँ होगा, हिली रीजन्स में. वेरी लिमिटेड लेवल ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर कैन बी प्रैक्टिस्ड इन द हिली रीजन्स. सो दैट्स व्हाई नेचुरली द रिसोर्स कैपेसिटी ऑफ दोज रीजन्स इज गोइंग टू बी ऑन द लोअर साइड. रिसोर्स कम है तो आर्मी नहीं रख पाओगे फुल टाइम. ओके, यू आर ओनली गोइंग टू हैव आर्मी ओनली फॉर दैट पर्पस व्हेन यू हैव टू फाइट. तो आप मोबिलाइज करोगे rather than you going to train them on regular basis. Alright, so these are the some of the problems with these Gana Sanghas. On the other hand, we have monarchies. So number one feature of monarchy, it is going to be hereditary. Okay, people are not going to have any say in choosing the king. That is something which is very much linked to monarchy. Second, succession is going to be based mostly on the law of primogeniture. Primogeniture means the eldest son is going to get the first right to become the king. Okay, but naturally kitna respect hoga हमें पता नहीं. Ashoka killed his 99 brothers to become the king of Mauryas, right? So to what extent this is respected, that's a different story altogether. Like similarly we see in the case of Mughals also, that at the time of Aurangzeb, he also killed his elder brother Dara Shikoh, he was killed. So to what extent primogeniture is going to be respected, that's a different story. But in general, this is something which is going to be followed. Number 3, centralized administration with the king at the head. So he is going to centralize. His centralization does not mean every decision is going to be taken by the king. However, every decision can be influenced by the king. At least. How? Because he will choose the people in different capacities. Who is going to become a governor? Who is going to become a specific post? That decision is taken by the king directly. Councils, they are going to help like Parishad Sabha, assisting the king in any advisory role. And finally, Vedic priest. The role of priest becomes very, very important in the case of monarchy. Because कौन बताएंगे उनको सूर्यवंशी, चंद्रवंशी? Why would people accept them as their king or queens? Why would they accept them? They will accept them only when eventually they are going to have the legitimacy event which is given by the priest हमेशा वाहवाही करेंगे उन लोगों की, and in return they are going to get gifts, they are going to get दान दक्षिणा जो भी possible है. Okay, that's why the role, that's why monarchy are more powerful, that's why monarchy are always more powerful in ancient as well as medieval India, and this is the major reason. Okay, because priests have a very big influence on people like you and me. Okay, starting from our names, क्या नाम होगा आपका. Okay, it also depends upon है ना the kind of various जो भी मतलब निकालते हैं वो कुंडली वगैरह निकाल के कहाँ से आपका नाम होगा, आर ई जिससे भी स्टार्ट होगा. एनीवे स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम योर इवन एट द टाइम ऑफ योर करियर कि कौन सा करियर अच्छा रहेगा इनके लिए. ओके, even later on, so they have a very big influence on the lives of people, and when they say, when they're going to give legitimacy to king, people are going to accept it. That's why in monarchy the role of priestly class becomes very, very important. Economy and taxation, as all of us understand, they're going to have regular taxes like bali, bhag, as well as on other kind of commercial activities they can always come up with kar and shulk. So this is something which we are going to discuss about 6th century BC. Okay, social structure का अगर हम बात करें, that we have already covered about the Varna system. I hope all of you remember what was Varna system. Initially it was based upon color. Okay, later on it got shifted towards profession, and finally it got linked to birth. In whichever family you are born, you will take that Varna. So stratified society based on Varna system. Second, we see the rise of some rich landowners. Okay, and they were given the title of Grihapati. Okay, or Gahapati. Grihapati or Gahapati. This is the title which is given to them. Small landholders, they were given the title of Kasakas. Shudras, they were mostly among the trades like cultivator as well as artisan, but in majority of the cases उनको सिर्फ एक ही ड्यूटी देते थे. They were going to serve the above 3 varnas, but धीरे धीरे करके उसको रिलैक्स कर दिया गया. New social categories, also we see the rise of untouchables. By the 6th century BC, this category was now going to become prominent. Okay, and these peoples, some certain kind of disabilities were imposed upon them. कि आप कुछ चीजें नहीं कर सकते. Like they lived on the fringes of settlement. They cannot have home at the center of any village. हमेशा कहाँ होगा? On the outer side. Second, they were marginalized and given very menial jobs. Okay, they were given very menial jobs. And number 3, they spoke different languages also from the Indo-Aryans in majority of the cases. Then we see emergence of new categories linked to rise of urbanization also. In the urban area also we see rise of certain kind of untouchables. Religion, this was a time where Vedic orthodoxy was as an established practice, and priestly class has high status. And this is the major reason why we see the rise of the heterodox sects. Why? Because the society, it was getting more rigid. Okay, it was getting more rigid. The ideas of Upanishad, they were not clearly understood by the people that commonly. When somebody was talking about Atma, Brahma, okay, Maya, what would you understand from that? It's so difficult to understand them. That's why those kinds of personalities were having the opportunities in the 6th century BC who can bring out some lucid information, lucid logics, which can make you understand the whole existence of humanity. And then that specific time, okay, we see the rise of intellectual awakening. Intellectual awakening means people are now not going to go by the established traditions. Vedic religion has always been dominant for 1000 years roughly, but now it was bound to be challenged by some new legal luminaries in terms of religion. They were bound to come up with new ideas. Okay, they're bound to come up with new specific logics which are going to now have a kind of tackling with Vedic religion. Okay, so this is the 6th century BC. In 6th century BC, we see the rise of major political and social changes. Key events which are linked here: revival of trade as well as urbanization. We see birth of Buddha as well as Mahavir. This is very, very important, the birth of Buddha and Mahavir, and these two will be responsible for the rise of major religions, rise of Buddhism and Jainism, and emergence of new religious order with new beliefs and philosophies. Okay, at the same time, the 6th century BC, it is not just important in Indian history, it is important even in the case of Persia, because Zoroastrian, जो Parsi religion है, it becomes prominent from 6th century BC in Iran or Persia. Similarly, in case of China, we see rise of 2 important personalities. One was Confucius, okay, and this Confucius was responsible for a major religion which is known as Confucianism, and second it is Taoism. So 6th century BC is not just about India. Please इसको आप ध्यान रखना, ठीक है. When we go for the major syllabus, वहाँ हम इन सब की बातें नहीं करेंगे. Confucius, Taoism, etc. इनकी बात नहीं होती है. Why? Because syllabus से directly related नहीं है. But since you know this, you can make very good introduction. That 6th century BC was about intellectual awakening in the whole of the world. Okay, or in various civilizations. We see this in Persia, we see this in China, and even in India, we see the rise of Buddhism as well as Jainism as major forces. Okay, so this is something which we can remember about 6th century BC. Let us move forward. इसको second number पे करेंगे. This is the, you see here, Zoroastrianism is going to rise here. In case of India, the birthplace of Buddha was in Nepal. Okay, so Nepal में उन्होंने mention किया हुआ. Then we have Mahavir, and in China we have Confucius and Taoism. So the whole world was witnessing some new ideas, and these ideas are bound to have a major impact. See it in terms of the people who are the followers. Even though if we see in the case of Iran, Zoroastrianism eventually is going to be taken over by Islam. Okay, but in case of Buddhism, Buddhism is going to spread to China. It's going to spread to the whole of Southeast Asia. Okay, the case of Jainism, Jainism was never a religion which was followed by a very high number of people. However, those who establish their faith in Jainism eventually remained very loyal to this. So in India, places like Gujarat, Rajasthan, as well as the area of Karnataka, these are the areas where we have seen major followings of Jainism, and they have remained all together since from those times. From India, Buddhism did not survive for a very long time. Okay, by the early medieval period, eventually we see the rise of Hinduism, and many of the ideas of Buddhism were taken within this. Even Buddha was made one of the avatar of Vishnu. So this doctrine of incarnation is very strong. Okay, so in Hinduism बहुत आसान है marketing. I'll tell you later on how they do it eventually. And in case of China, if we see today's modern China, so in modern China, even though it is communist, that does not mean nobody is following a religion. Many people, they follow the principles of Confucius. Many are followers of Buddhism. Okay, but there are followers of Buddhism also, because as all of us know, two famous travelers, Fayan and Hunsang, they came from China, and from when they came to India, eventually they learned about all the principles. They even translated these Buddhist texts, and through this Buddhism traveled to China. So थोड़ा सा बात करते हैं कन्फ्यूशियस और ताओइज्म के बारे में. ये आपको इथिक्स वगैरह में भी थोड़ा हेल्प कर जाएगा. ठीक है, वहां पर भी पूछते हैं किस किस के बारे में, किस बेसिक आइडियाज क्या क्या है. Okay, so two great thinkers, we have already discussed about this. Okay, initially the ideas which they gave, they were responsible for moral as well as social behavior, ki how you should behave in a society. Okay, how you should take decisions, what should be specific qualities to be followed. And eventually after their death, we see the rise of various temples, and Confucius exerted a big influence not only on the political class of China but also on the common people. That's why Confucius is more famous. Just like in India, Buddhism is more famous. Why Buddhism is more famous in India? Because naturally the whole world has accepted its ideas. Okay, even though in terms of followers of the religion we have more percentage of Jainism, however more popular is still Buddhism. So let us see Confucius. Okay, so Confucius, he was born in Shantung province of China. He studied history, poetry, philosophy, music. There are 5 important works which are directly linked to him. Like we have this book of records, which talks about ethics, which talks about the various regulations of human society. Then the book of odds, which gives us various principles of morality. Book of changes, spring and autumn annals, and finally the book of history. So various work were linked to Confucius. And the most important part with respect to Confucius, okay, these are his 5 cardinal principles. Even ethics में भी जब आप पढ़ते हो, ठीक है, so you can utilize them in the case studies. What are the cardinal principles with respect to Confucius? जो Chinese ethics है, okay, in that these 5 principles are very important. Not with the communist government, वो अलग, ठीक है, at least at the level of the ethics. Humaneness, that you should be human, you should be kind in your behavior, you should respect everyone else. Righteousness, okay. Third, propriety. What is the meaning of propriety? It means your conduct should be fair. Okay, it should take into consider all the established traditions. It should not be आप जो मन में चाहे वो कर सकते हो. Wisdom, very very important. Okay, because wisdom is something which we learn through experience, and once we learn it, we should utilize our wisdom. And most important part of any relationship, this is trustworthiness. Trustworthiness with respect to interpersonal relationship, trustworthiness with respect to our relationship with the state, even though it's an abstract identity, but still without trust a nation cannot stand together. Okay, these were the 5 major principles which were linked to Confucius. सिर्फ रफली याद कर सकते हो. कभी भी देखो जब एग्जाम में आंसर्स लिख रहे होते हैं ना, अगर क्रॉस कल्चरल हिस्ट्री के ऊपर एक भी पॉइंट आ जाता है, दैट इंक्रीजेस द ब्यूटी ऑफ द आंसर. देन he said that if you follow these 5 principles, उससे फायदा क्या होगा आपको? Number 1 is going to become a source of wisdom for everyone. Second, strong society can be built up on the basis of this. Number 3, he said that the superior man, not just about intelligence or knowledge, but also exemplary character. Character is more important when it comes to a superior man, not about capabilities, not about just superficial intelligence. 3 virtues, intelligence, courage and goodwill, ensures balance in relationships. Okay, children should obey parents, wife should obey. अब ना वो patriarchal तो आना ही है, ठीक है. Now that is up to you what you wish to do. Next, however, there is a limit. One should resist wrong commands from superiors. So he has left some of the ideas like conscience, अंतरात्मा जो होती है ना, which is a kind of quote within ourselves through which we judge should we follow it or we should not follow it. So he has given that kind of freedom to everyone, that even though you should obey your elders, but if some wrong kind of command is coming, then you can resist it. It's not like that you can go for 100% undivided loyalty. And good governance, he says, these are the 3 principles which every government should follow. Number 1, sufficient food for the people. Number 2, strong military for defense. And number 3, public trust and confidence in the leader. This is how a strong governance can be ensured in any of the country. All these ideas, they belong to Confucius, and they were primarily eventually used by the Chinese. Taoism, okay, or Lao Tzu, he is considered one of the greatest philosophers before Confucius and said to have been around 53 years older. So 50 साल बड़े थे लगभग. Then he authored a short book in 2 parts before disappearing. There is a kind of story about him कि एकदम से disappear हो गए थे. Okay, initially he was very influential, but then he left everything and went away. And there is a lot of mystery which is surrounding the Taoism. Then his teachings are important. Why? They're very much related to Buddhism. They're very much related to Buddhism. Let's see number 1, source of unhappiness. So Buddha ने sorrow के ऊपर ले लिया. Source of unhappiness. Argued that human selfishness is the root cause of unhappiness. If we are unselfish in our life, तो happiness ज़्यादा रहेगी. That's what he's saying. Second, selfishness fuels limitless desires. पहुंच गए ना desires के ऊपर. अभी आएगा बुद्धिज्म में. वहाँ पे सबसे पहली चीज क्या होगी? There is sorrow. This sorrow is because of desire. Okay, if you control the desire, eventually you can become happy. This again. So that's why Taoism is very much linked to same ideas like Buddha. इसको आप याद कर सकते हो. Which are inherently unfulfillable and lead to unhappiness. Okay, we have only one life, but we think like we are living in multiple universes. 50 हमारे wants होते हैं अलग अलग. Okay, we want to be number 1 also, है ना. पढ़ाई में भी, sports में भी, music में भी. कितनी चीजें चाहिए एक बारी में? You can't be number 1 in everything. It's impossible. There's human diversity, है ना. Different set of talents we have, but still our wants, when we want something, है ना, हमारा ध्यान ऐसे रहता है कि सब कुछ मिल जाए हम लोगों को. Number 3, nature as a model. Now this is something which is a very powerful belief. अगर कभी ऐसे में sustainable development की बात करें, ठीक है, तो see this nature as a model. He says that natural world functions harmoniously. Human behavior should strive for a similar balance. Okay, like if you see the world, सब कुछ है ना. We have mountains also, rivers also, everything is there, and there's a fine balance. Just like that, our life is also going to have some sorrows. Our life is also going to have some happiness. Some wants will be able to have, some wants will never have in life. Some things we can control, something we can never control. So we should be aware about those smaller things. And this is what he's saying. Follow nature as a model. Then he talks about knowledge and its impact. He says that gaining knowledge has taken humans away from natural state of innocence. Initially हम innocent थे. Okay, now that is debatable. that is debatable, right? If we see the British they always differentiate that initially people were savage, savage थे, and then eventually we created a civilization. But he is going the opposite way. He is saying initially we were innocent. It depends upon how you treat human, how you think about human. Everybody thinks differently about us. Like if you see people like your Arthashastra written by Kautilya. Kautilya says that human are inherently selfish. वो भी यही बोलते हैं, we are inherently selfish. That's why every person thinks differently about human, and on the basis of that we are going to see some theory. तो यहाँ भी यही है. He's saying that because of knowledge we have changed from our innocent being, and then he says this knowledge has led to development of complex societies but also unhappiness. Why complex societies? Because the initial societies, they're only having one thing: you have to somehow save yourself, you have to ensure existence. Everybody was indulged either in hunting and food gathering or agriculture. But see today, how many professions are there? How many professions are there? So we have become a very complex society. Every small thing has diverse set of profession. हर किसी के लिए expertise अलग है. We see अब today आज की डेट में अगर हम एक बच्चा पैदा होता है ना, a person is born, eventually they have so many things to do. Previously it was so simple. So that's why today's societies are very, very complex, and that's what he talked about. And because of this increasing complexity, unhappiness is also increasing, because it is increasing your wants. अब चाहिए क्या, वो उसकी वजह से increase हो रहा है. If we see Zoroastrianism, so this was something which was going to develop in Persia. This is considered one of the world's oldest revealed religion. Okay, you should be aware about it because India also has a minority Parsi community, but economically very powerful. Tatas, the vaccine gurus. Who are these? Poonawala. तो वैक्सीन किसने बनाया था? वहीं से आया था, Parsis. Okay, so one of the world's oldest revealed religion. Historical significance: the official religion of three major Iranian empire from 6th century BC that dominated the Middle East. Later on, it was replaced by Islam. Okay, the founder was Zoroaster of Persia. The core belief, it is monotheism. Monotheism means belief in only one God. Belief in one God, and that God name is Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Light. Okay, the Lord of Light. Their holy book is known as Zen Avesta, which is very much linked to our which book? Rig Ved, very close to it. Similar kinds of gods and goddesses are mentioned, and the content it has hymns or उसके अंदर mantras हैं, prayers हैं, laws, myths, historical reflections, and doctrines and rituals share similarity with those found in the Vedas, that is our ancient Indian scriptures. So Rig Veda के साथ बहुत similarity है of this Zen Avesta, and this Zoroastrianism is something very important in case of Persia. Now they have their particular set of teachings. उनके भी अपनी कुछ specific. They taught that great object of religion, state or society is the cultivation of morality. This is the only objective of state, society, that there should be cultivation of morality. And the highest religion concept is purity of thought, word as well as deed or action. Okay. Ahura Mazda is omniscient, means they are talking about the qualities of the God. Omniscient means knows everything, omnipotent, all powerful, and finally omnipresent. It is present everywhere. And in this, sacrifice and image worship, they were discarded. Both of these things, they were not required. Fire was worshipped as a symbol of deity and considered the highest form of worship. So fire, why fire was given the maximum? Because it is directly linked with the God, which was the Lord of Light, because fire gives us light. And charity was made an essential part of religion, and service to the poor was particularly emphasized. That's why these are the major elements of Zoroastrianism. Okay, in 2012, जब तक पैटर्न चेंज नहीं हुआ था यूपीएससी का, तो यूपीएससी ऐसे क्वेश्चंस भी पूछता था, व्हाट आर द मेन आइडियाज ऑफ Zoroastrianism. तो इवन दो इट्स नॉट अ पार्ट ऑफ योर ऑप्शनल, बट इट कैन ऑल एनी डे बी आस्क्ड इन योर प्रीलिम्स और मेंस पेपर, कभी भी पूछ सकते हैं, बिकॉज रिलीजन्स एज अ होल यूपीएससी कुछ भी पूछ सकता है. तो थोड़ा सा इसके बाद आपको आइडिया लग जाएगा, अच्छा रहेगा. ठीक है. नाउ वी सी आवर ओन स्पेसिफिक heterodox sects. We also had large number of sects. Okay, we had so far discussed about the Chinese, we have discussed about the Zoroastrianism, but now we'll discuss about the one which are very important for our exam. Now, what is the meaning of heterodox? इस word का meaning क्या होता है, कहाँ से आता है ये heterodox? Okay, so here hetero means other or different. Okay, and dox it means opinion or belief. So if you have a different set of belief which is away from the established tradition, it means you are a heterodox person. Okay, you may have heard commentaries होते हैं cricket में, they said orthodox shot है ना, orthodox, it means this is the technique which has been learned by the people since we have seen the development of cricket. फिर कुछ लोग आते हैं like धोनी, okay, people like Dhoni, they are very heterodox, they are not following the established tradition of wicket keeping कि ऐसे इस तरीके से आपका position होना चाहिए, जो मन में आए कर रहा है, and he is successful with this, so that person becomes heterodox. So whenever we use the word heterodox, it means in case of India, those who are not a believer in the Vedic religion, and they are known as heterodox. Please remember this, okay? In case of religion, those who do not believe in the sanctity of the Vedas, they become the heterodox. Now, what are the key features? Okay, let us see the key features of all of them. Number one, they were questioning the tradition. They're questioning the tradition of God. They're questioning the various practices. Second, majority of them, they were wanting ascetics. Okay, they were wanting ascetics. In fact, in case of India, this whole tradition which was going to become important from 6th century BC. Okay, this tradition is known as renunciation tradition. Okay, because these people were leaving their houses, these people were living away their normal life. See the case of even Siddhartha or the case of Mahavira, both of them, they left their normal family life. This tradition is known as renunciation tradition. Please remember this. Okay, renunciation tradition बोलते हैं इसको. Or they became wandering ascetics in the search of truth. And finally, why do we see the rise of these various heterodox sects? इसका main reason क्या था? New political structures. Okay, the king were ready for new philosophies. Second, growing urban centers. With the rise of urban centers, we see rise of the wealth which was with the various varnas. Okay, most importantly the Vaishyas. But in the social order, they were not having that much respect, so they wanted more respect because they were having more money. That's why the rise of urban centers, urban areas became the biggest follower of Buddhism and Jainism. Development of craft, these craft people again, they became economically well off with the rise of craft. However, the social class, the social respect that they were enjoying in the Vedic religion, it was on the lower side. That's why they again became follower of Buddhism and Jainism. And increased trade also led to the rise of Buddhism and Jainism. What was the main reason for that? The main reason was in the Vedic religion, giving away loans or taking loan, it was considered as a sin. Okay, money lending was something which was not seen with good eyes, and if you do not go for money lending, can it sustain any of the businesses? It's impossible. कभी हो नहीं सकता, possible ही नहीं है. You see any business, okay, in the world, it requires loans. Okay, and since money lending was not allowed by the Vedic religion, it was bound to have a shift because these traders or craftsmen, they're bound to go for those religion which were having more positive philosophy. And that is something which we need to remember. Okay, that's why we see rise of many heterodox sects. तो अगर आपसे कभी क्वेश्चन पूछ लिया जाए कि why do we see large number of heterodox sects in India during this time, ये 7-8 factors हैं इसके. Number one, it is the Vedic rigidity. The Vedic rigidity was very profound. Okay, it was very profound with respect to what was to be believed and what was not to be believed, what kind of sacrifices are required to be done by the people. That was fixed. Okay, and that is something which was not liked by the people. Second, the rise of heterodoxy. That's why we see the rise of heterodoxy. It was like a revolt. Okay, it was like a revolt by these people. It was not one or two people. There were around 62 sects. Number three, territorial identities. Look, in every area, they require a god. Okay, which could be liked by the people, and that eventually is going to help the king in creating his legitimacy. So since we were having more number of territorial divisions during this time, this was bound to have an impact on the religion also. Number fourth, disillusioned elites like those Gahapatis who are having more wealth, those traders who are having more wealth, they are not having the same kind of social status कि पैसा है लेकिन इज्जत नहीं है. They would want a different kind of religion. So that's why those disillusioned elites, they were also responsible for the rise of Buddhism and Jainism. Next, openness to new ideas. People were receptive towards new ideas because anyhow they were not able to understand the concept of Atma, Brahma, reincarnation. All those ideas were not understood. Urbanization trade, as I've already given example with the growth of cities, okay, they required positive philosophies. The Varna order, it was very restrictive in nature. They were saying that you could not dine together. But once we go to urban areas, can we have these kind of superficial differences? It's impossible to have the idea that. That's why with the rise of urbanization, cities will require those positive philosophy which can ensure such differences are not accounted for. कि सब बराबर है, आसपास है. And finally, the grievances of Kshatriya. The Kshatriyas, they were not given the right to have all the ashrams which were only available to the Brahmanas. And that's why some of them, they rose against it. And if we see the example of both Buddha as well as the Mahavir, both belong to Kshatriya families. So if we see these 7 factors, they are divided into religious, social, economic as well as political factors. तो कभी भी क्वेश्चन आ जाए आपका तो बेसिक चीजें याद रखने की. इंडिया में why do we see the rise of intellectual? See, the large number of people were there. Like in Buddhist text, बहुत सारे sects को mention किया हुआ है कि पुराना कश्यपा, मखाली घोषला, अजित केशकमलिन, पकुदा Pachayana, as well as Sanjaya, Vidyaputra, as well as Niganta, Netaputra. So many people are mentioned, but we naturally, we are more accustomed only towards Buddha and Mahavira. Okay, why do not we learn about all of them? Because उनके जो text हैं वो preserved नहीं हैं. Their ideas are not preserved in their own specific writings. Okay, some idea about their philosophies we found from Buddhist sources as well as the Jaina sources, and that's why it limits our understanding of other philosophical ideas. But even then, these people are mentioned in various sources, Buddhist as well as the Jaina one. They are described as homeless wanderers, okay, and they are the founder of various sects as well as leaders of orders. Now, with the rise of this intellectual awakening in India in 6th century BC, we see rise of new religious sects. Second, we see rivalry as well as emergence. Rivalry was bound to be there. Okay, look, religions are also competing with each other. Okay, religions are always competing with each other because everybody wants that they should have more followers. Okay, so that's why that started in India. And finally, long-term influence on Indian culture. Why? Because the architecture, ideas of long-term, this was bound to have impact. Like if we see the concept of stupa, okay, becoming more popular with the rise of Buddhism, or the ideas of Chaitya, Griha, rock-cut caves. Why do we see? Because of the ideas of Buddhism as well as Jainism. This is bound to have a long-term impact. One of the major sect of 6th century BC, it was Ajivikas. Okay, Ajivikas is a sect. Okay, it has evolved from the initial ascetic groups. Its founder is considered as Nandavach. Okay, he is considered as the founder of this Ajivikas sect. However, the most profound personality of the Ajivikas, as all of us know, it is Makhali Koshala. He was the most profound, but he was not the founder. He was roughly the third and the greatest of the Ajivikas. Okay, these Ajivikas, okay, they were a believer in Niyati or fate, that everything is predetermined. सब कुछ पहले से लिखा हुआ है, जो होना है वही होने वाला है, कुछ change नहीं होगा. This is something which is known as Niyati or fatalism. That everything is predetermined. It doesn't matter आप अच्छा कर रहे हो या बुरा कर रहे हो, है ना, जो होना होगा वो होना ही है, कहानी खत्म. That is something which they believed in. Shravasti was an important headquarter of Ajivikas sect. Other than that, there were some other preachers also like Purana Kashyapa as well as Bhagunta Kachayana. They joined the Ajivikas sect after the death of Ghoshla and infused new life to it. Second, they believe that there are 6 inevitable factors in everybody's life. There's going to be some gain and some loss, some areas of joy, some areas of sorrow, and finally there's life as well as death. तो ये हर human की life में होना ही होना है. This is something which is believed by Ajivikas sect. Next, there is no life after death. They were not a believer in this circle of life and death. He said generosity is taught by idiots. जो करना है करो, relax. Nothing is going to happen. There is no life after this. It's the end of it. Criticism of Vedic practices. He opposed the various harsh austerities which were imposed by them, patronized by the wealthy lay people as well. Lay means common people. Okay, and spread across India, but less influential than Buddhism and Jainism. But that's why you should be aware about it. Okay, you should be aware about it. Why? Because UPSC asked about this renunciatory tradition of 6th century BC. You should be aware about some personalities, okay, like Makali Ghoshala, you have to remember. He was a contemporary of Mahavir. Then the most infamous school. This infamous school is something which is followed by all of us, weekends. The term Lokayata, it signifies materialistic thought, है ना, कि हमें तो कुछ ना कुछ accumulation चाहिए ही चाहिए. If we talk about both Buddhism as well as Jainism, none of them were a believer in too much accumulation in life, because when you go for too much of accumulation, कुछ ना कुछ चीज चाहिए, है ना, you're always going to be stressed. But there was a school who was a believer in materialism. Why materialism? Because ये सब बाकी सब चीज हम जानते ही नहीं, ये सब बकवास है. हर किसी जो भी कुछ भी है, everybody is doing something for their own benefit, for their own soul. Nobody is doing anything for anyone else. This school is known as Lokayata or materialist school. Indian materialism has been named Charvak after one of the two founders. The founders includes Charvak as well as the Ajit Keshakamlin, who are said to have established Indian materialism as a formal philosophical system. They believe in the concept of skepticism, कि ज्यादा बातों पे ध्यान मत दो. लोग बहुत तरह की बातें बोलते हैं. Don't believe in them. And second, they believed in the pursuit of knowledge through only experience, nothing else. और experience में क्या हो सकता है? Through our 5 senses. जैसे 6 sense कुछ नहीं होगा. There are only 5 senses. और उनके लिए क्या है सबसे important है? Pleasure. That's why he was a believer in materialism, and they questioned the authority of Vedas. This school, okay, even though we will not accept it, this is something that we live by. Unless there is a major episode in our life, है ना, कल पेपर है, suddenly we change, है ना, we go to temples, whoever god we worship, we start drifting toward that. But normal life, okay, it is directly linked with Lokayata, है ना, wanderlust चाहिए, adrenaline rush चाहिए, everything, it is directly linked to Lokayata, because we have 5 senses, है ना, इन्हीं 5 senses के थ्रू हम लाइफ को एक्सपीरियंस करने वाले हैं naturally, and they are a believer in only this. दे से कोई भगवान नहीं है, कहीं नहीं जाने वाले, है ना, you have come from the soil and eventually you will go into the soil, and there will be no specific thing which is going to be remaining outside that. But naturally it looks too simple, it looks too simple. That's why many people will not accept it, even though they will do it every day. तो लोकायता स्कूल मुझे इसलिए अच्छा लगता है, at least some people were accepting this. We are not we are doing this every day, we do this every day, but we want higher level of ideas, something that is not in our experience. But anyway, I'm not giving you a religious lecture, जो मन में चाहे करो follow, but what is important, you should be aware that these things were there. Now the important thing is, it was not like that there was a harmony among these various school of thoughts, or like Buddhism, they were also appreciating Jainism, or that Jainism was appreciating the Ajivikas were giving lots of prominence to the materialistic school or the Charvak. There was a lot of rivalry among them. Like in the Jaina text, okay, Bhagavati Sutra, we see Makali Ghoshala, who was the leader of Ajivikas, as a negative person, and Buddhist commentary, even by Buddha Ghosha, they mock Ghoshala. So there was a kind of rivalry. Remember this for prelims, okay? There was a rivalry. Then the Buddhist Jataka stories metaphorically compares heterodox sects to fireflies, है ना, कि कुछ नहीं, मतलब मक्खियां घूमती रहती इधर से उधर, fading before the brilliance of Buddha. That in front of Buddha, all of them, they want to sit and get the enlightenment. So there was a rivalry among them, and this is but natural. When you have multiple faiths, so naturally ये तो होना ही है. What was the possible reason? The competition likely stemmed from the desire to attract followers. Look, a religion is only going to become a formal religion, okay, or a sect will become a religion only when it has some specific, like number one, there should be an authoritative text or a holy book should be there. Then there should be a priestly class, and finally they should have followers. A sect will not have all the 3 things, okay, but a religion will, and that's why they will always be competing for followers, because more number of followers, okay, they are going to give dan dakshina, which is again going to increase the benefit of priestly class. So that's why this circle will never end. That's why organized religions are always going to have these three things. They will have a holy book which is written in nature or a holy text. They will have intermediary people who will connect the lay people with the God directly, and this is the priestly class, है ना, यही है तरीका connect करने का, ये मतलब ना phone की तरह है. And finally comes the followers. Without followers there is no religion. Okay, it's the people who accept some religion, and then only we can have them. Let us now take the easiest topics, है ना, Jainism. So if we talk about Jainism, I hope all of you know the story about Mahavir. Okay, what was the story? How do we see the rise of Jainism? Okay, so in Jainism we have a concept of Tirthankar or the teachers. So how many teachers are there? 24 teachers were there. Okay, and before Mahavir there were 23 teachers. He was the 24th one and probably the most influential one. Jainism wasn't the initial name. Please remember that. Okay, initially they were not using the word Jaina. The initial name they used were Nir Granthas. Okay, Nir Granthas was the initial name, means somebody who is free from bonds, from any kind of existence. As per this Jain tradition, we use Mahavir as central figure but not the founder. Who was the founder? The founder was Rishabh. Okay, Rishabh ji, he was the founder. He was the first Tirthankar according to Jain text. Okay, even Yajurved mentions 3 earlier Tirthankar: Rishabha, Ajitnath, as well as the Arishtanami. All these 3 are mentioned even in the Yajurved. Mahavir's role, what was his role then? Okay, he was the 24th one. He is known as Jina. Jina means somebody who is a conqueror, somebody who can conquer everything around him. A title signifying his victory over the cycle of rebirth. Okay, established Jainism as a distinct religion, and he organized followers into monastic as well as lay followers. Monastic means those who are going to become monk. Lay followers who are going to be follower of Jainism, but they don't have to follow all the 5 vows. There are 5 vows of Jainism which we'll talk about. उनमें से कुछ vows हैं जो lay followers को follow करना जरूरी नहीं है, जैसे कि celibacy. Like if somebody is going to get married, they cannot have celibacy. So lay followers, common followers, they have some relaxed rules which are going to be followed by them. But anyway, Jainism is something which is very, very prominent for Indian culture. If we see his life, he was born in Kundagrama, close to Vaishali. If we see his family, his father's name was Siddhartha, his mother's name was Trishula, and he was directly linked with the royal family. If we see his early life, attracted to spiritual life from childhood itself, left his home at the age of 30, then wandered for how many years? Roughly 12 years, and in the 13th year, he was able to get the enlightenment, practiced austerities, discarded garments, met Ghoshla for 6 years. He was together with that Mahakali Goshala. Okay, but eventually they parted ways over the differences in their ideas with respect to God. So at the age of 42, he got enlightenment, became a Tirthankar and Mahavir. His teachings he preached for next 30 years, patronized by both rich as well as elite people. Died around 72 when he was 72 in Pavapuri, and his death or final liberation was a joyous event for the Jainas. I hope all of you are aware about Santhara. Santhara, it's a kind of fast which is done just before death. Okay, and that's how they get the final liberation. So that's why it is termed as a joyous event rather than that of a grieving one, because you get out of the cycle of life and death. Followers initially from all sections of society, later confined to trading and money lending communities. उनमें ज़्यादा इनके followers थे. What was the reason? The major reason was that Jainism believes in complete non-violence. Complete non-violence means you cannot even affect those things which you consider as non-living. But that's why whenever we practice agriculture, naturally there's going to be death of millions of lives. Okay, it may not be human life, but there are going to be some. That's why they are not invested in the various parts of farming. The farming related में नहीं होता. In fact, I invest a lot in stock market. The stock markets में Jain people, they do not invest in those companies which are taking any form of life. Do not invest in that. जैसे non-veg का अगर कोई आएगा, they will not invest. Okay, so that's how much they are conscious about it. Okay, because they are following it from millennia, and that's why it has become part of their system. Okay, for people, those who are not followed Jainism, it will feel like ये कैसे कर लेते हो. Okay, but the important thing is the first principle, it is non-violence, absolute non-violence. Okay, complete non-violence. The most important principle, no other religion lays as much emphasis on non-violence as much as Jainism. Even Gandhiji, he was directly affected by the ideas of Jainism. Okay, he was the one who learned from it, and that's how non-violence became a principle in his own private life. Okay, so we have to understand non-violence is very, very important. This is with respect to the food that you intake, this is with respect to your interpersonal relationship, this is with respect to your relationship with others. This is something which is very, very important. Second, salvation through self-discipline. Self-discipline is very, very important here. So it teaches that liberation from the cycle of rebirth can be achieved through strict self-discipline, austerities and ethical conduct. According to Jainism, the world has no beginning or end. कोई beginning or end नहीं है. It goes through a series of progress and decline according to an eternal law. Dualism, the world is seen as concept two eternal substances, soul as well as the matter. That is, one is Jeev and then Ajeev, and their interconnection creates karma. Karma is a very beautiful concept which you need to understand. Okay, karma as a concept is very different in Buddhism, Hinduism and Jainism. Okay, in Jainism, karma is more of a karmic particle or a particle of the universe which get attached to your soul. Okay, it get attached to your body also, and unless every small component of karma is taken out of your body and soul, you cannot have enlightenment. So karma is seen more of a negative entity in Jainism. Please remember it. Okay, it is considered as a karmic particle, a particle which gets attached to your soul as well as your body, and unless the last shred of karma is taken away from you, you cannot enter the process of enlightenment, or you cannot achieve complete liberation. Okay, that is what is the concept in Jainism. In Hinduism, karma is something which is directly linked with something that you do. Okay, so it's a part of any activity, any action which has been taken part by. That is what is the concept in Hinduism. While in Buddhism, since this is a religion which is a believer in mindfulness, okay, it believes in mindfulness, in Buddhism, this comes at the level of intention. है ना कि अगर गलत इंटेंशन है तो वहीं पे काम खत्म हो गया, even if you do that action or not. So this is the concept of karma, very different in all three. Buddhism, it says be mindful, and since you are mindful, you are not going to even think about it. Okay, that kind of control is required on your mental faculty. Hinduism, गलत सोच ले कोई बात नहीं, करो मत, ठीक है, it's fine. But when it comes to Jainism, this is not that easy of a concept. In Jainism, this karmic particle is going to get attached, and this karmic particle they generate because of your lack of knowledge. Okay, because of lack of knowledge, it gets attached to your body and your soul, and unless each and every karmic particle is separated from both of your body and soul, you cannot achieve liberation. In fact, the last santhara, जो last में fast किया जाता है, that is done in order to get all the karmic particle out of your body and soul, and once that is done, you achieve liberation. So that's why the concept of karma is completely different. हम तो आज की डेट में टाइम पास लेवल वाला कर्मा बोलते हैं, इंस्टेंट कर्मा है ना, कुछ गलत बोला एकदम इसके साथ भी गलत हो गया. That's how we see it, but it's one of the most important concept, at least in Indian subcontinent, and the religions which have grown in this area, हर किसी में कर्मा का कंसेप्ट है, बट उसका जो मीनिंग है वो बहुत डिफरेंट है हर किसी का. Then these were the major ideas which you need to understand, that unless we get over karma, we cannot get liberation. This is directly linked with tenets of Jainism. Then three ratnas. This is something which you have to follow. This is how you can beat the karma. Right faith, right knowledge and right conduct. ये तीन चीजें चाहिए. Plus in your life you should have these 5 great vows. Okay, these 5 great vows include: number 1, not to kill or injure, ahimsa. By your any activity there should not be any killing. Number 2, not to steal, है ना, चोरी करना नहीं करना. Number 3, not to lie. These 3 are common to everyone, even if you are a monk or you are a lay follower or common follower. However, for those people who are going to become monk, there are two extra also. Like number 4, it is celibacy, that you're going to follow the path of brahmacharya, not having sexual activity in the life. And finally, not to possess property. You're not going to possess property because householder के लिए last दो possible नहीं है. That's why for the common followers आप 3 व्रत कर लीजिए, बहुत है आपके लिए. And for those who are going to become monk, जिनको monk बनना है, you have to follow all 5 of them. तो इन्हीं को हम बोलते हैं पंच महाव्रत. Okay, these are the Panch Mahavrat or the 5 vows which are required to be followed, okay, by every Jaina. अगर आप common follower है तो first 3, monk है तो all 5. Spread of Jainism, if we talk about it, so Jainism, it spread initially in the eastern part of India, and from the eastern part of India, eventually it went towards the south. I hope all of you know about the event, which is the most important event, that the Magadha famine. And during the time of famine, some of the people who were followers of Jainism, they went towards the area of south, most importantly towards Karnataka. Okay, and through this, with a period of time, this has become important and spread in different parts of India. One important thing with respect to Jainism is, Jainism has never been a religion which has been followed by a very high number of people. It is having a specific base, and that base is having immense faith in their religion. Okay, and that's why the spread of Jainism, even though this has been limited, and why it has been limited? Because it is allowing you, okay, very austere life. बहुत मुश्किल लाइफ जीनी पड़ती है इसके लिए. Very specific professions you can go to. Okay, the food habits are very much limited because naturally non-veg तो छोड़ो, you can also not consume those things like onion, है ना, खाने पीने में सबसे ज़्यादा टेस्ट किस चीज़ का आता है? ऑनियन का आता है ना, गार्लिक का आता है, पोटैटो. So these things, okay. So with respect to diet also, severe restrictions are there in Jainism. That's why it is difficult for people like those ना कि वो सिर्फ conversion करने के लिए accept कर ले, हो ही नहीं सकता, because following it in itself is very difficult, and that can only happen with the nurture of socialization from the early life. It's so difficult to just accept Jainism and then follow it, because half of your life you have been committing sins with respect to Jainism, okay, and then you're going to follow it. It's next to impossible. Plus occupations के लिए ऊपर काफी restrictions हैं. You cannot become part of agriculture. That's why majority of the Jaina people, they are traders or they are having secondary economic activities. Primary economic activities में कभी participate नहीं करते, and that's the major reason why. Because while doing primary economic activities, naturally there is going to be some form of violence. Okay, you go for mining, you go for agriculture, कुछ ना कुछ तो killing होने ही वाली है. But anyway, it spread to some areas of like Karnataka, Western India, Gujarat region and Rajasthan. These areas are very much part of followers of Jainism, and even in south, okay, in the area of Kanchipuram, we have some of the followers of Jainism. Okay, now this is the concept of non-violence. Non-violence के अंदर बहुत ज़्यादा emphasis है. Extreme measures are there. Okay, like see, the 5 vows are common to both monks and lay followers, but they relaxed for the lay ones. The monks were to observe the vows more rigorously than the lay followers. That is very clear. Jainism places great emphasis on non-violence, strict observance. The faith, they wear even a muslin cloth around their mouth and nose so that they would not inhale small insect even by mistake. तो कोरोना का जो मास्क है वो परमानेंट है. So those who are strict followers, completely strict followers, they do it to avoid trampling on ants and other insects. Jain monks use feathers to sweep the path before walking. So if you want to be a complete follower of this path, so it's not easy. It's not easy. हम चारवाक लोगों के लिए तो बिल्कुल नहीं है. Jaina, they could not practice agriculture or other crafts. They involve killing or injury to living organism. Hence they took to trading and money lending and excelled in it. As a result, they are closely associated with urbanization. So इसलिए maximum Jaina कौन से एरिया में रहते हैं? Urban areas में. Egalitarian religion, so there is no such division of the Varna system which we have in the Hinduism. However, okay, they could also have a status of Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, not on the basis of birth, on the basis of what you do, on the basis of your action, not on the basis of your birth. Okay. Then women were admitted into the monastic order. However, as a woman one cannot attain salvation by accumulating merit by good deeds. Women could be reborn as a man and then strive to attain salvation. Okay, so this is something which is believe in this, and this is also one of the reason why we have a division in Jainism, Shwetambar and Digambar. Okay, so in Shwetambar there is an acceptance, okay, that women can also have a salvation in Shwetambar, but in Digambar no, do not believe in it. Okay, they do not believe in it. So as we know, Jain schism means difference, and we see the creation of a two schools. So Mahavira's death, schism occurred due to famine. In this famine, Bhadrabahu along with some people went to south, while the other they remained in the north under the leadership of Stalabhadra. These people who remained in the north, they started breaking with the tradition of Mahavir. Okay, they started accepting more those things. That's why the people, when they came from the south under the leadership of Bhadrabahu, there's a difference, and the Shwetambar and Digambar got separated. In general, the Digambar do not wear any clothes, while the Shwetambar they wear clothes. Second, as we have just discussed, Digambar, they believe that they have never had a woman Tirthankara, while the Shwetambar believe that the 19th Tirthankara was Malinath. Okay, and that was a woman. Okay, so these two are the major differences over Shwetambar and Digambar that you have to remember. And Jain texts, we have many Jain texts. The Jain texts are known as Angas, okay, or Siddhanta. Okay, Siddhanta बोलते हैं, क्या बोलते हैं? Angas, and काफी सारे उप अंगाविस भी हैं. Okay, major text and the minor text. This is something which you need to remember with Jainism. As far as exam goes, okay, as far as exam goes, mains में ज़्यादा question Jainism पे नहीं आते. But in prelims, every year you will encounter one question on Jainism and Buddhism. दोनों पे क्वेश्चन काफी आते हैं, तो एग्जाम के पर्सपेक्टिव से भी इसको समझो. ओके, देन दिस इज मोर लाइक अ स्टोरी. ओके, इन दिस स्टोरी देयर इज अ क्वीन कमलावती who is telling the king, okay, that whatever life you are living, it is absurd. Okay, जो लाइफ जी रहे हो बकवास है. क्या करना है आपको? Material possession bring no lasting satisfaction. Only spiritual knowledge offers true salvation. Worldly life is likened to a bird trapped in a cage, and finally asceticism and detachment are paths to liberation. So these are many stories. जब अगर हम पढ़ेंगे इनके specific text, तो ऐसे बहुत सारी चीजें हमें वहाँ पढ़ने को मिलती हैं. Why do we see decline of Jainism in India in general? इसके कुछ specific reasons हैं. Like number one, absence of royal patronage. Very few kings, okay, have given patronage to Jainism directly. Like we see Chandragupta Maurya. Yes, he was a follower of Jainism. Okay, but that too we do not know throughout his life, because whatever evidence we have, it is about the last years of his life. We have King Kharavala, okay, from Odisha. He was a follower of Jainism, but we have never had a king like Ashok who was a follower of Jainism, which could have spread it on a very larger scale. So this absence of royal patronage was one of the major reasons why Jainism could not become as mass spread as that of Buddhism. Second, there was a split, and whenever there is a split, eventually it affects the roots of any religion. Number three, lack of missionary zeal. तो उतना conversion के पीछे नहीं जाते Jainism में. Okay, like we see lots of conversion in Buddhism as well as Islam. That kind of conversion is not there in Jainism. Fourth, factionalism. We have seen the severity of practices. So following Jainism, just converting to Jainism is something which is not that much important. What is more important is following its basic practices, and that again requires a lot of patience, and majority of people cannot do that. And the spread of Buddhism as a rival faith. Buddhism and Jainism, they were rising at the same time, and that's why if one is going to become super hit, तो दूसरे वाले का तो एरिया कुछ लिमिटेड होने ही वाला है. That's why Buddhism got affected by that. Now we see Buddhism. As all of us know, Buddhism is more about a medium path or middle path. Okay, Buddhism, whenever we talk about it, eventually, initially this was one of the most important religion, but with the period of time, it became completely out from India. Birth name was Siddhartha. Family lineage again, Sakya clan. He was the son of Shuddhodhan and Queen Maya. Queen Maya is very important because lots of you can say Jataka stories or the Buddhist art, it is linked with Maya's dream. Okay, the Maya's dream was with respect to the white elephant which came in her dream, which gave the ideas either the person is going to become a very big king, or it's going to become a very important sage, or who's going to be a founder of any religion. But this was the birth prophecy at the time of his birth. The birthplace was Lumbini near Kapilavastu, which all of us know is in Nepal. Upbringing, he was raised in a very luxurious kind of lifestyle. He was not allowed to understand any of the problem faced by the common people, so that eventually his father and mother were very desperate that this person should remain a king. He should not give away the kingdom to somebody else. Okay, and finally he married Yashodhara and they had a son named as Rahul. Now there are various symbols linked to him. Okay, like we have Buddha's birth is linked with lotus, his departure or renunciation, जो उन्होंने संन्यास लिया, that is linked with horse. Enlightenment is linked with Bodhi tree. Then the first sermon जो उन्होंने दिया था सारनाथ में, that is very much linked with Dhamma Chakra Privartana, 24 spokes eventually, which became part of our emblem also. And finally it is about Mahaparinirvan, which is directly linked to his death. So the major turning point, okay, as all of us know, once he went out, he encountered 4 things. Number 1, he encountered an old man, which made him realize that everybody is going to go through the process of aging, which is bound to be very painful. Right? It's not going to be like the youth. Second, he saw a sick man, which again increased his questions about human existence. Then he saw a corpse, which signifies that there's only one truth in life, and that is death. Death is bound to be there for everyone. And finally, a serene wandering ascetic hinting at path beyond worldly suffering. So when he saw these various things, eventually he got affected by them. And finally he took the decision, okay, and he eventually went out of the royal palace. And this event is also known as the Great Going Forth, or also known as Mahabhirach Kramana. This is how he went out along with his chariot, and his charioteer, his name was Chana. He went out, and just same story like that we have in Jainism, that same story is there. He also went through the process of suffering. Okay, initially he joined few people like Alara Kalama as well as Udaka Ramputra. Through them he was trying to understand, okay, what is the ultimate reality. But finally he realized, okay, that this is not going to work. He was just going through very high level of asceticism, बहुत सारी चीजें, but he was given a little bit of food by Sujata, and thereafter he went for meditation, and after 49 days eventually he got the enlightenment. This is the story with respect to his enlightenment process. Okay, so initially he was trying to follow very austeric path, कि जिसमें कि भाई सबसे ज़्यादा difficult condition हम accept कर लेंगे, but he realized that this is going to lead him to only towards death. Nothing is going to come out of it. That's why he broke his fast, accepted the offering from Sujata, and then eventually went for meditation. This meditation that he did, it was under a Bodhi tree, which eventually became very important in the Buddhist teachings. Then the spread of his teachings. The first sermon that he gave in the deer park in Sarnath, this event is known as Dhamma Chakra Privartana, or the turning of the wheel. And then finally he lived till the age of 80, and he continued. Like it is often said that every day he used to cover a distance of 30 to 35 kilometers. He was a very strong built, except in the monsoon days, because in the monsoon day they used to stay in their caves. Okay, this is how he became prominent. If we talk about Buddhist texts are very prominent. Okay, Buddhist texts are very, very prominent, and there have been various councils. Okay, there have been various councils. Like first council, it was at Rajgriha. Rajgriha was the first council, and this under the patronage of Ajashatru. It was under the control of Upali. In this council, we see the recitation of Vinay Pitaka. Vinay Pitaka, it is linked with the rules of the Sangha. If you want to join the Sangha, क्या rules आपको follow करने हैं. Second, Ananda, he was the number 1 disciple of Buddha, and he recited the Sutra Pitaka, or the sayings of Buddha. And finally, on the basis of that, we see the creation of Abhidhamma. Abhidhamma is about the philosophical meaning of the sayings of Buddha. This combinedly is known as Three Pitaka, or 3 baskets. Second council, it has held Vaishali. It led to the split within this. One, they become follower known as Thavridin, and the second eventually became the Mahasangika. There was a split in the Buddhism itself in the second council. Third council, it held under Ashoka. Under Ashoka, eventually we see the final compilation of the majority of the text of Buddhism. And the last is the fourth council. In the fourth council, we see the rise of Mahayana category of Buddhism. Okay, initially Buddha was not considered as a god. He was considered as more of a teacher. He was considered more of somebody who was an enlightened being. However, with the period of time, he was given the status of God. And that's how we see the rise of Mahayana Buddhism. And this Mahayana Buddhism became prominent from the fourth Buddhist council. Whenever we talk about that how these Buddhist texts have been preserved over various centuries, so NCERTs में इसके ऊपर थोड़ा हम लोगों ने बात किया हुआ है that initially they were taught only orally. We do not have any written records. But after his death, through these councils, okay, we start the process of composition. Okay, and finally, जो इनका final shape है, ठीक है, the final shape it has been influenced by the Sri Lanka also, because बहुत सारा जो इनको final shape मिला है वो श्रीलंका में मिला है. In Sri Lanka also we have some texts like Dipavamsha and Mahavamsha. They also provide a lot of information about Buddhism. Okay, even though they are the chronicles of the Sri Lankan nation, but at the same time they provide information about this itself. The oldest writings of Buddhism, they are found in Pali language. With the period of time when Mahayana Buddhism became prominent, they shifted toward Sanskrit. So Sanskrit के अंदर भी बहुत सारा इनका लिखा गया, ठीक है. बाद में काफी सारे translations हुए. This is how we have seen various Buddhist material. Now within Buddhism there are various sects. The various sects which we'll discuss later, बाद में इनका elaborately पढ़ेंगे, but you should know Mahasangika, Saravidhan. Okay, so these are the various sects we have. And universities, okay, universities have played a very major role in the writings of Buddhism. Two very famous universities, the first one is Nalanda and the second is Vikramshila. Vikramshila was more famous for the Tantric Buddhism or the Mahayana Buddhism, while Nalanda was more prominent with respect to the early phases of Buddhism. So universities has played a very important role in this. Hinayana form or the lesser vehicle, this is also important, but this has become more popular in Sri Lanka, Burma and Thailand, while the other Southeast Asian countries, while जो हमारा Mahayana Buddhism है, that has become more famous in the case of China. Okay, China केस में वो ज़्यादा famous हो गया. In fact, there is a word known as Theravada. Theravada is a school, okay, which is known as the school of the elder, which is again linked with Hinayana school of Buddhism. Text पाली में कंपोज किए हैं, 3 पार्ट में डिवाइडेड है, सूत पिटका, विनय पिटका एंड अभिधम्मा. सूत पिटका sayings of Buddha, Vinay Pitaka, they are the standard rules which are to be followed by any monk, and finally comes the Abhidhamma, which provides a perspective on the sayings of Buddha, which deals with ethics of Buddhism. Okay, जो books हैं उनको ये निकाय में डिवाइड करते हैं. Like if we see Sutta Pitaka is divided into various nikayas. Okay, and within these nikayas we have stories like Jatakas. तो जतकास जो है ऐसा नहीं कि अलग से है, जतकास in itself is a part of सूत पिटका. उसी के अंदर ही एक स्पेसिफिक टेक्स्ट है जिसको हम क्या बोलते हैं, जतकास. जतकास इज नथिंग बट दे आर द प्रीवियस लाइफ स्टोरीज ऑफ बुद्धास, बोथ ऑफ ह्यूमन एज वेल एज एनिमल फॉर्म. नोबल ट्रुथ की अगर हम बात करें तो एज वी हैव सीन इन द केस ऑफ ताओइज्म, बहुत आसपास में है. देयर इज सफरिंग एंड सोरो. द कॉज ऑफ ह्यूमन सफरिंग इज डिजायर एंड क्रेविंग, एंड दिस पेन कैन बी रिमूव्ड बाय सप्रेसिंग डिजायर एंड क्रेविंग, and this has to be achieved by following a disciplined life, and this disciplined life is only going to be by follow 8-fold path. तो 8 specific conditions है जो आपने follow करनी है. According to Buddha, a person should aim at attainment of nirvana or the highest bliss. It could be achieved by any person by leading a virtuous life and by following the noble 8-fold path. So anybody could achieve it. There is no specific limitation with respect to men or women, which we see in the case of Jainism. तो एक difference है Jainism और Buddhism में. Buddhism में they allow that it can be attained even by the women also. 8-fold path में right views, resolve, speech, conduct, livelihood, effort, recollection as well as meditation. Meditation plays a very very important role in the case of Buddhism. That's why you must have seen Dalai Lama also. Dalai Lama is mostly focusing on meditation, because once you go for meditation your internal character starts becoming purified. Okay, you become more conscious of your activities. First your mental activities, then your activities with respect to the physical form, and that makes you okay very much closer to enlightenment in the long run. Here Buddha did not mention or talk about God. He neither accepted nor denied the existence of God. इस चीज को आप ध्यान रखेंगे. In Jainism there is acceptance of God, but गॉड आर ऑलवेज सेकेंडरी टू तीर्थंकार, है ना. फर्स्ट पे क्या आएगा, तीर्थंकार और द टीचर्स विल कम. बट इन द केस ऑफ बुद्धिज्म नीदर एक्सेप्टेंस नॉर रिजेक्शन विद रिस्पेक्ट टू बुद्धा. बट इट्स अ ट्रेवेस्टी कि बाद में बुद्धा को ही गॉड बना दिया. इनिशियली बुद्धा डिड नॉट एक्सेप्ट दैट इज देयर अ गॉड और देयर इज नॉट अ गॉड. ही आल्सो एडवोकेटेड equality, preached non-violence, but it is not comparable to Jainism. Jainism is something which is extreme non-violence. It promoted trade also, and eventually later on we see they were going to become a believer in mindfulness. कि भाई mindfulness के ऊपर focus करो. When we see the architecture, okay, there are lots of Buddhist site. Okay, Buddhism is something which is very important because the initial architecture of India, okay, art and architecture, it is directly linked with stupas. Stupas, even though they were during the times of the Vedic period also, but they were not that much massive. Once it get attached to Buddhism, stupas were going to become very, very prominent. Okay, so before his death, एक final इनके बीच में discourse चल रहा था with his disciple Ananda. So in this he talks about, okay, कि भाई the Buddha advised against excessive focus on rituals related to his remains and emphasized personal spiritual progress. However, he did acknowledge the potential benefits of offering reverence at stupas. कि भाई आप ऐसा कुछ कर सकते हो. Okay, so that's why stupas, there is Sanskrit word text used for the Pali term known as thupa, where mounds erected to house relics of the Buddha. तो initially ये था. Naturally क्या था? Initially after his death, 9 stupas were created. 9 stupas were created. The maximum number of stupas, as per the tradition, they were created by Ashoka. How many were there? 84,000. अब आज की डेट में बचा तो नहीं है, है ना? We have only few stupas. Like the most famous is that of Sanchi. We also have with respect to Bharhut. और भी कई major stupas हैं. But as per tradition, there were 84,000 stupas which were built by Ashoka, and they were directly linked to Buddha. Then there is a possibility. This is what was asked in prelims last year, that the Buddhism के जो relics होते हैं, ठीक है, और the stupas जो हैं, they are not starting from Buddhism, they are also pre-Buddhist. So the practice of building stupas might have predated Buddhism, as Buddhists have been, due to presence of sacred relics, stupa became venerated as symbols of both Buddha as well as his teachings. तो पहले से ही था, but बाद में इसके साथ recognize करने लग गए, and once it got recognized with this, it was eventually going to have very big impact. Even according to Ashoka Vanda, he distributed the Buddha relics and promoted stupa construction across his empire. 84,000 stupa बनाए थे उन्होंने. Then with the period of time, जो stupa का architecture है वो हम बाद में पढ़ेंगे art and culture में. उनका जो stupa का creation का method था, that kept on changing with the period of time. Initially they were very simple in nature. Okay, by the time of Ashoka, उन्होंने थोड़ा सा उनको enlarge करना शुरू किया, stone architecture वगैरह का use किया था. बट विद द पीरियड ऑफ टाइम उसको और ब्यूटिफाई करते चले गए, तो बहुत ज्यादा एवोल्यूशन हुआ है विद द पीरियड ऑफ टाइम. शुंगास के टाइम में बहुत ज्यादा इनोवेशन हुआ विद रिस्पेक्ट टू स्तूपास. ऑल ऑफ यू मस्ट हैव नोन अबाउट तोरण द्वार, द 4 एंट्री गेट्स, जिसके ऊपर बहुत सारा पेंटिंग्स वगैरह भी किया जाता है, स्कल्पचर्स भी क्रिएट किया जाता है. दोज वर डन ड्यूरिंग द टाइम ऑफ शुंगास, उनके टाइम में वो सब हुआ है. ठीक है, तो बहुत सारे एक्सपेरिमेंटेशन चलता रहा. नॉर्थ इंडिया में और साउथ इंडिया में बहुत डिफरेंस है विद रिस्पेक्ट टू स्तूपा बिल्डिंग. इन नॉर्थ इंडिया इट इज कंसिडर्ड दैट जो अपना मेन हेड होता है, अंडा जो होता है, टॉप है ना, वेयर वी हैव, विद इन व्हिच वी हैव द relics of Buddha, that should be very simple. But in South India they said that since it is where the Buddha's relics are kept, it should be the most ornamented form. तो इसलिए आप स्तूपा देखेंगे, सांची स्तूपा एंड अमरावती स्तूपा, there is a big difference between them. सांची स्तूपा at the top it's very simple, but अमरावती स्तूपा it is very much ornamented. So depending upon the thought process, आपका process change हो जाता है. How are stupas built, as all of us see? So inscription found on railings, pillars of stupa, we get to understand that stupas were not just built by the kings, they were built by the kings, they were built along with the common people, they were built by the traders. So that's why one single person was not responsible for the expansion of stupas in Indian subcontinent. हर किसी ने donation दिया, बहुत सारे inscription है small and that provide information about that. Okay, so if we see stupa, ऐसा प्लान होता है. ठीक है, this areas specifically, okay, this is the middle area where we have the अंडा और semi circular, so इस तरीके से बन जाता है. 4 specific directions are there. In 4 direction we have the gates. These gates are known as Torna Dwar. Okay, at the top, we have Yashti, and over the Yashti where we have the umbrella. This is how stupas are built. Okay, and these stupas are found in many parts of the India, and most famous, as we have already discussed, Sanchi, Bharhut, and finally we have is Amravati. These are the most famous one. Even though at Takshila also we found stupas. अब NCERTs में इनके ऊपर बात किया हुआ है कि that in Amravati, okay, they found one stupa and in 1796. However, they did not pay much attention to that. That's why eventually it could not be preserved. Okay, Colin Mackenzie documented some of the sculptures, but the report remained unpublished. Thereafter, we see the coming of Walter Elliot. He collected the panels for museums from here. H.H. Cole, he talked about that by stupas को in situ preservation करना है. There are two forms of preservation, in situ and ex situ. In situ means wherever it is found वहीं पे उसको preserve करना है. Ex situ museums में हो गया कि उनको आप लेके चले जाओ फिर preserve कर दो. H.H. Cole said that there should be in situ preservation of stupas, but it was unsuccessful. This is the case of Amravati. That's why Amravati का stupa आज की डेट में मिलता ही नहीं है. It is just एक फोटो बनाया हुआ है उसका, but as such वो मिला नहीं. But the story is not same in the case of Sanchi. Sanchi was discovered a bit later in 1818. Then there was proposals to remove its gateway, but it was rejected. And that's why today if we find Sanchi stands as a testament to Buddhist heritage, while Amravati stupa remains a denuded mound. And इसका reason यही है, इसका preservation ज़्यादा अच्छे से हो पाया, but उसका उतना नहीं हो पाया. तो ये आप याद रखना, prelims में कभी कभार ऐसे statements आ जाते हैं, which of the following stupa is preserved in relatively better condition. तो आंसर अमरावती नहीं होगा, आंसर would be Sanchi. Okay, that will be the answer. So Amravati's earlier discovery might have predated a strong emphasis on in situ preservation. Sanchi's relative completeness at the time of discovery might have influenced the decision to keep it intact. Okay, this is something which you have to remember. Decline of Buddhism in India, हम already बात कर चुके हैं, लगभग सेम ही तरह की कहानी है. Like number one, fragmentation into multiple realms. Okay, like the initial were only Hinayana, but साथ में महायान में भी डिवाइड हो गया. Shifting languages, initially were dependent upon Pali, later they shifted towards Sanskrit. Okay, Sanskrit was very much close to our Hinduism, and eventually जो उनका अलग से meaning था वो finish हो गया. Loss of royal support, after Harshvardhana there was no major king who gave support to Buddhism. Rise of Bhakti movement during the same time in South India, later on it came to North India. Hun invasion, Hunas, they led to a decline of Buddhism in Northwest, while if we see the Muslim invasion, like all of you know about Bhaktiar Khalji. So Bhaktiar Khalji was responsible for the downfall of both Nalanda as well as Vikramshila. So the Muslim invasion was responsible for decline of Buddhism in the eastern part of India. Hun invasion was responsible for decline in northwestern part of India. And during this time, as all of us know, even the Rajputs, they were persecuting the Buddhists. Okay, because they were again the Rajputs, they were not Kshatriyas. They required legitimacy. Legitimacy was going to come from the priestly class. The priestly class, if you want legitimacy from them, naturally you do not have to give any patronage to Buddhist. और भी दो चार points हैं. We see rise of Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya became a major philosopher by 8th-9th century, and finally, as all of us understand, major tenets of Buddhism, they became part of Hinduism. और एक बार part बन गया, कहानी खत्म. ठीक है? So all the major parts became within the Hinduism. That's why Buddhism spread outside India a lot. Okay, and that's why the land of the origin, India में आज की डेट में ये कम follow किया जाता है, or in Nepal. But if we see countries like Bhutan, if we see areas like Tibet, if we see whole of Southeast Asia, they are a complete follower of Buddhism. Okay. This is the time where we see the beginning of Bhakti, Shiva, Vishnu, Durga, they became very prominent. Revival भी शुरू हो गया था by early medieval period, and that is the reason why Buddhism eventually did not become that much prominent after the early medieval period, और भक्ति जो है वो बहुत important हो गया. ठीक है. Whenever we talk about various schools, तो हमने बात किया अभी heterodox schools का. Heterodox schools are those schools which do not believe in Vedas, but there are some schools who are a believer in Vedas, and these schools they are known as traditional or orthodox schools. Okay, और ऐसे हमारे कितने स्कूल है? 6 स्कूल हैं. विशेषिका है, न्याय है, शंख्य है, योग है, पूर्व मीमांसा है, as well as the उत्तर मीमांसा और वेदांता, and they are linked with various personality like विशेषिका with Guru Kanad, न्याय with Gotama, शंख्या with Kapila, योग with Patanjali. Patanjali he was not the founder, उन्होंने compile किया था सारी प्रैक्टिसेस का, है ना. बाबा रामदेव ने उसको कंपनी बना दिया, है ना, पतंजलि, बट ही वाज द इनिशियल वन टू जस्ट कंपाइल ऑल द योगा प्रैक्टिसेस. तो ऐसा नहीं था कि ही वाज द फाउंडर ऑफ योगा. योगा वाज देयर इन इंडिया. ओके, इनफैक्ट अगर आप स्कल्पचर्स देखोगे ऑफ इवन इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन, सम ऑफ दोस postures that look like that of yoga. Okay, so he was just a compiler. Okay, so Purvamamsha linked with Gemini and Vedanta linked with Vyas. And even Max Muller is a very important personality. He observed that 6 systems of philosophy were developed over many generations with contribution made by individual thinkers, and all of them, they accepted the sanctity of Vedas. जब भी हम schools की बात करें, there are orthodox schools and then there are heterodox schools. Heterodox school में सबसे ज़्यादा important है Buddhism and Jainism. In Orthodox school, these are the 6 schools of Indian philosophy. Please remember them. Okay, Orthodox, ये prelims में क्वेश्चन आ चुके हैं. 2014 में क्वेश्चन पूछा था which of the following are the Orthodox school of Indian philosophy, और उसमें एक चारवाक भी दिया हुआ था. अब चारवाक ऑर्थोडॉक्स में नहीं आता, वो किस में आता है? हेट्रोडॉक्स में आता है. ठीक है, हेट्रोडॉक्स में आता है. आपको ये भी पता होगा द डिफरेंस बिटवीन आस्तिक एंड नास्तिक. आस्तिक आर दो स्कूल्स which are a believer in Vedas. So they सारे आस्तिक हैं. नास्तिक are those school who do not believe in Vedas. So नास्तिक स्कूल में आपका Buddhism, Jainism as well as your other heterodox sects which includes your Ajivikas, which includes even your चारवाक, वो सारे आपके नास्तिक स्कूल के अंदर आते हैं. आज की डेट में नास्तिक is something different, है ना. If you're not doing any puja on any of the religious day, you become a Nastik. But in those times, Astik and Nastik had a specific kind of meaning. And that meaning was directly linked with Vedas. If you're a believer in Vedas, you're Astik. If you're not a believer in Vedas, you become a Nastik. So that is very philosophical level, not at the level of. अब इंडिया में जितना भी हम बात करते हैं मॉन्यूमेंट स्कल्पचर्स, उसकी एक पूरी क्रोनोलॉजी है. लाइक इन 1814 फाउंडिंग ऑफ इंडियन म्यूजियम इन कलकत्ता. फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम म्यूजियम वाज फाउंडेड. 1834 publication of essay on the architecture of the Hindus. Cunningham also explored the stupa at Sarnath. 35 to 42 James Ferguson surveys major archaeological sites. 51 establishment of Government Museum of Madras. 1854 Cunningham publishes the Bhilsa tops, earliest works on Sanchi. 78 Rajendra Lal Mitra publishes the Bodh Gaya, the heritage of Sakya Muni. Sakya Muni because he belongs to Sakya clan, तो Sakya Muni इसलिए बोलते हैं. 80 H.H. Cole appointed curator of ancient monument. 88 passing of Trajet-Trov Act, giving the government the right to acquire all objects of archaeological interest. Then in 20th century, 1914, John Marshall and Alfred Fokker, they published the monuments of Sanchi. 23 John Marshall publishes the conservation manual. 55 Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, he leads the National Museum at New Delhi. And finally in 1989 Sanchi was given the status of World Heritage Site. तो यार ऐसा कुछ क्वेश्चन बन सकता है, म्यूजियम्स वगैरह के ऊपर बन सकता है. कि द फर्स्ट म्यूजियम इट वाज इन कलकत्ता, देन इट वाज इन मद्रास एंड फाइनली वी सी दैट इन द न्यू दिल्ली. क्या क्या पब्लिश हुआ है. प्लस लास्ट ईयर इन प्रीलिम्स दे आस्क्ड द नेम ऑफ द पर्सनालिटीज. लाइक हियर वी सी द पर्सनालिटीज जेम्स फर्गुसन, अलेक्जेंडर कनिंगम, राजेंद्र लाल मित्र, एच कोल, जॉन मार्शल. तो थोड़ा सा पर्सनालिटीज का नाम याद रखना, ठीक है, कि दे आर लिंक टू विच स्पेसिफिक पार्ट. लास्ट उन्होंने आर्कोलॉजिस्ट पूछा था, अगली बार कुछ और पूछ लेंगे तो वो हमें याद नहीं रहता. बट एनसीईआरटीज में जो कम से कम दिया हुआ है क्रोनोलॉजी, दैट शुड बी रिमेंबर्ड बाय ऑल ऑफ अस. देन वी सी द इमर्जेंस ऑफ स्टेट. दिस पार्ट इज रिलेटिवली ऑन द इजी साइड. हम ऑलरेडी बात कर चुके हैं ऑफ महाजनपदास. So when we see the rise of Mahajanapada, some social changes were there, ecological changes were there. What were the social changes? Like emergence of Buddhism and Jainism. These religions posed alternative to mainstream Vedic religion, propounded new beliefs and challenges, and resulted in a society with diverse religious landscape. Ecology-wise also, we see majority of the settlements were now shifting towards the again river valleys, and that was bound to have an impact on agriculture surplus, and this was going to lead to the process of empire building. The empire building start हुआ from the 6th century BC itself. There are various dynasties. I hope all of you know of Magadha, starting from the Haryanka dynasties. Then we have the which dynasty? Shishunag dynasties. Then we have the Nanda dynasty, and finally we see the rise of Mauryas. तो ये सारा जो empire building process है वो यहीं से start होता है. Then why do we have a significance of Mauryan Empire? Because this was the first pan-India एम्पायर. इंडिया के लेवल पे फर्स्ट एम्पायर हम नंदास को बोलते हैं. नंदास क्रिएटेड द फर्स्ट इंडियन एम्पायर, पर फर्स्ट पैन इंडिया एम्पायर अगेन इट इज लिंक्ड टू द मौर्यास. And finally, after Mauryas, we see eventually the change in the character of the state itself, and that was done by Ashoka. Why? Because Ashoka was now not a believer in imperialism. He was a believer in cultural conquest. आप सबने वर्ड सुना होगा, भेरी घोषा was replaced by धम्म घोषा. तो धम्म जो था वो स्टार्ट हुआ था. Okay, so various dynasties are there which we have to understand. Okay, with the rise of Magadha, centralized government advisory bodies, revenue collection, expenditure, they became specific subjects for the government. While the Ganasanghas, they were still trying to focus on the republic nature, okay, which was not going to have that much impact on the creation of empire building. They remained small kingdoms. While the Gangetic plain, we see rise of Magadha. Bimbisar, he was very strategic. Bimbisar का एक जो specific study था, today like we see marriages as events of love, celebration of love. In those times, marriage was also an important point of expansion. है ना कि शादी करके बड़ा अच्छे connection बना लेते हैं ना. So alliances were created by he had marriages with Lichavis as well as the royal family of Koshal, even the Madara family of Punjab. सबके साथ इन्होंने matrimonial relationship बना लिए थे. And later he conquered the areas like Anga. This is how the process of empire building started. This is again the same map which we have seen previously. So this is the region of Magadha. To the east of Magadha we have is Anga. So this Anga was captured by Magadha initially, and then they started the expansion towards the west. So इनका west का expansion start हुआ. Okay, so why Magadha came to power? क्यों सबसे बड़ा kingdom और बाद में empire क्यों बना? इसके बहुत सारे reasons हैं. Like number one, it was having a strategic location, and the Gangetic plan offered strategic and economic advantages. Okay, the Uttarpatha route, it passed through Magadha, source of revenue as a result of trading activities. The role of the various personalities like Bimbisar, Ajatashatru, Mahapadmananda, all of them, they were very powerful personalities, and since they were powerful personalities, they were bound to create empire. So, rulers की policies भी बहुत ज़्यादा important थी, and as a result of these, we see rise of Magadha as a powerful kingdom, and Bimbisar initially fostered religious tolerance, and later on, the same was continued by the Ajatashatru. If we see the administration of these, they were a believer in a specific kind of structure, जो was center, provincial, and that at the lowest level. Basic unit was village. Land was also divided into various parts, including like Kshetra or the cultivable land, wasteland or the Aranya or the Vana was known as the forest. Village administration, Gramani, land officers were there. Taxes were collected. Taxes were now going to become compulsory. You are not going to be like voluntary. कि मन चाहा तो tax दे दिया. They bound to collect bali, bhaga as well as the various other taxes, and naturally the peasant economy was based upon agriculture. So throughout ancient and medieval India, agriculture remains most important. Ajatashatru is very famous and infamous at the same time. Infamous because of the way he came to power. He killed his own father, and that's how Ajatashatru came into the picture. When he killed his own father, they had got the area of Kase in Dori. So the Prasenjit, he asked for the Dori back, eventually which led to a military confrontation. Prasenjit was overthrown, and he also captured Koshala. Thereafter, they also went toward the western expansion. Areas like Avanti eventually were also defeated in the two times. Shishunak ruled for 50 years, and finally came the Nandas. Nandas are very important. Their founder was Mahapadma Nanda. He was one of the most important personality in the whole of ancient India, and a believer in the expansion of the empire. Okay, and even we find that the mentioning of the Nandas in inscriptions like Hathigumpa. Hathigumpa belongs to King Kharavela of Odisha, and there it is mentioned that this area used to be under the control of Nandas. So Nandas were the first initial maker of empire, and this inheritance was eventually taken by Mauryas. But in between we have the foreign invasions. Though foreign invasions, the first invasion it belongs to the Persian, the second invasion it belongs to the Alexander. The first it belongs to 6th century BC itself. Okay, the Persians. So who was the first person to control this? The person was Cyrus. Cyrus was the first one, emperor of Persia, invaded India around 530 BC, destroyed the city of Kapisha, and this information comes from Herodotus. Herodotus says that Indian principality, this was the 20th strapi of the kingdom. है ना, provinces को क्या बोलते थे? Strapi. The 20th part था, but this was the most profitable one. This was continued, and we see the inscriptions of डेरियस वन, है ना. इंस्क्रिप्शन इसलिए इंपॉर्टेंट है बिकॉज यहीं से अशोका क्या सीखेंगे, इंस्क्रिप्शंस. पिलर्स का जो ट्रेडिशन है, इट इज अगेन इट वाज फ्रॉम द टाइम्स ऑफ पर्शियन. So that is going to be the impact. This Persian invasion of 530 BC is going to continue till the coming of Alexander. Alexander is going to arrive on the landscape in 1326. है ना, तो लगभग 200 साल के लिए कंटिन्यू रहा. Once they captured it for next 200 years, the northwest part of India remained under the control of the Persian. And during this time, lots of changes were there with respect to the culture. Like if we see, blend of Persian and Indian culture in the art and architecture started. Economy became more vibrant in this area. Administration also was going to have influence. For the first time, we see the writing system becoming very prominent. And which script is going to emerge? Kharoshthi script. This is going to emerge in this region. Currency wise also, Sigloi coins, the silver coins, they were adapted again from the Persian. And finally, the word for the coin, this is Karshpana. Karsh jo word hai, again it comes from the Persian. So there was a lot of impact of the Persian invasion on the art and culture of this region. Naturally, we see the coming Takshila. Okay, Takshila was one of the most important town under the control of them because Gandhara जो था उसकी capital क्या थी? Takshila उसकी capital थी. Okay, it was a part of the Archimedes. Archimedes is nothing but the again word for the Iranian or the Persian Empire. Major center of learning and culture, attracted students from vast regions seeking knowledge. Rediscovered eventually by the efforts of Sir John Marshall. Considered as a great intellectual achievement, and it is possible Panini lived in this area. In fact, we also see that even Kautilya, okay, he also lived in the area of Takshila. He was a professor of political science. ऐसा बोला जाता है, तो exactly confirmed नहीं है. The word Sindhu also eventually arises from here itself. जो हिंदू word बनेगा कहाँ से start होता है? यहीं से start होता है because Indus was seen as a boundary. So those people used to live in the area to the east of Indus. They were considered as हिंदू. बाद में धीरे धीरे वर्ड जो है ग्रीक्स ने एच हटा दिया, इंड बन गया, इंड से बन गया इंडिया बन गया. तो दिस इज हाउ भारत एंड इंडिया दोनों आज की डेट में हमारे वर्ड्स हैं टू डिनोट द एरिया with respect to our geography. There is a lot of connection between Persian and Sanskrit which we have seen. Number one, the word Arya itself, and eventually as we have seen Zand Avesta and the Rig Veda. There are lots of common keywords. That's why there's a lot of direct, and even the gods and goddesses which are mentioned, they are very much close to each other. Then Alexander's reign. Just before the coming of the Mauryas, an important event comes for us, and that is the reign of Dhanananda. Dhanananda, during his time, Alexander came. When Alexander came, eventually Takshila surrendered, or the ruler of Ambi, without fighting. But then we have the battle of Hydaspes, and in this one major personality comes into the picture, and that person is King Porus. Even though he gets defeated, but by saving his chivalry, by seeing his capability, he was again reinstated. Then Alexander wanted to come towards the mainland India, but his army रिफ्यूज कि बहुत हो गया, अब घर चलना है, हमारा काम खत्म, हमारे बस की नहीं है वो आगे लड़ाई करना. नाउ इसको हम किसी भी तरीके से इंटरप्रेट कर सकते हैं. वी एज इंडियन से वी आर हैविंग अ वेरी लार्ज आर्मी, दैट्स व्हाई अलेक्जेंडर वेंट बैक, बट नोबडी नोज द एग्जैक्ट रीजन. एवरीबडी थिंक्स दैट दे वर वॉर वेरी, है ना, वॉर लड़ लड़ के पागल हो गए. जैसे अमेरिका 20 साल तक अफगानिस्तान में, देन दे वेंट बैक. नाउ वी कैन नॉट से अफगानिस्तान डिफीटेड द अमेरिकन्स. इट इज बिकॉज दे वर वॉर वेरी. द सेम सिचुएशन कुड हैव अराइजन फॉर द अलेक्जेंडर. When we see the history of Alexander from the Indian point of view, there's a lot of exaggeration because देखो यूरोपियंस ने हमारी सबसे पहले हिस्ट्री लिखी, so naturally they are going to write that history which is going to give more strength to their narrative, and their narrative was going to be fulfilled by giving more weightage to the history of Alexander. तो मैक्स मिलर ने जब पहली बार हिस्ट्री लिखी तो 1/3 of ancient history was only the history of Alexander's invasion. But now in today's, if we see, क्या उसका ओवरऑल इम्पैक्ट था किसी को नहीं पता. डायरेक्ट इम्पैक्ट, पॉलिटिकल इम्पैक्ट तो मिसिंग ही है. जो है वो क्या है, इनडायरेक्ट है. तो मेजर जो इसका आउटकम है वो कौन सी लेवल में मिलता है हमें, इकोनॉमिक में या फिर कल्चरल में मिलता है. पॉलिटिकल में वी डू नॉट नो एग्जैक्टली व्हाट वाज द इम्पैक्ट. थोड़ा बहुत हम बोल देते हैं ग्रीक ट्रैपीज वर एस्टैब्लिश, ओके, बट naturally what impact it had on the long term history of India, nobody knows. Economic, yes, new trade routes were opened. R.S. Sharma बताते हैं new trade routes over the land as well as the sea, they got opened because naturally the area which was used by the armies, okay, to create way for fighting, बाद में वो क्या बन जाते थे, trade routes बन जाते थे. Greek merchants and craftsmen, they were also arrival increased with the Greek settlements. बहुत सारी अलेक्जेंड्रिया ओपन करके चले गए, है ना, कम से कम 4-5 अलेक्जेंड्रिया, और कोई नाम पता ही नहीं था, है ना. All of the settlements of the Greek, they were known as Alexandria. Then Greek accounts provide information about this, but majority of them they are exaggerated. Power vacuum, this is often we considered that because of his invasion, power vacuum happened in northwest part of India, and that's why it became easy for the expansion of Mauryas. Mauryas का expansion आसान हो गया. So naturally इस पर debate आता है. Debate is, क्या अलेक्जेंडर सही में great है? Is Alexander the Great really great in Indian history? He was considered as the great in European history. We can understand, okay, because starting from the area of Greece all the way capturing whole of Persia, okay, so that is a symbol of the strength of the Europeans. But he came to the border of India, है ना. ऐसा तो महमूद भी आए थे, महमूद तो और अंदर तक इन्वेजन करके गए थे. Why don't we call Mahmud the Great? Why don't we call Muhammad Ghuri the Great? So when we see this in the light of neutrality, it becomes difficult to accept Alexander as the great, at least in Indian history. अब महमूद द ग्रेट, है ना, अफगानिस्तान हिस्ट्री, हाँ ठीक है. इंडियन हिस्ट्री में अशोका द ग्रेट, बट यूरोपियन हिस्ट्री में क्यों नहीं बोलते तुम अशोका द ग्रेट? बिकॉज नेचुरली अशोका's impact was in the Indian territory. That's why it could be the great, but in whose history? That's a big question. Since the Europeans wrote our initial history, that's why these people always kept on calling him as the great. But that has been questioned by the nationalists. और आज की डेट में we cannot call him the great in Indian history because naturally he was not having any major bearing. ऐसा कोई नया चीज तो देके नहीं गए हमें. उससे ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट तो पर्शियंस का था. Through them we learned about inscriptions, है ना. Through them Ashoka learned about the various pillars which are used eventually to communicate his message to the masses. Okay, so that was having more bearing on India's administration rather than about the initial invasion of Alexander. When we see Mauryan Empire, the Mauryan Empire, I hope all of you know, okay, the whole geographical spread, it is made on the basis of the various inscriptions of Ashoka. These inscriptions are spread in different parts of India as well as today's Pakistan as well as the area of Afghanistan towards the northwest. तो ये पूरा एरियाज है जहाँ पे हमें इनके वेरियस इंस्क्रिप्शंस मिलते हैं. बट बिफोर दैट लेट अस टॉक अबाउट द सोर्सेस. व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट द सोर्सेस फॉर द मौर्यास, सबसे ज्यादा बड़ा सोर्स क्या है? अर्थशास्त्र है. अर्थशास्त्र इज द मेजर सोर्स, बट द बिगेस्ट प्रॉब्लम विद अर्थशास्त्र इज इट डज नॉट इवन मेंशन द नेम ऑफ मौर्यास. मेंशन ही नहीं करते. ना मौर्य मेंशन किया, चंद्रगुप्त ही कर देते, वो भी नहीं किया, कुछ भी नहीं किया. नथिंग इज मेंशन्ड देयर. So the biggest problem while using it as a source of history is we do not know if we are entering the right waters. सही जगह उसको अप्लाई कर भी रहे हैं या फिर नहीं कर रहे हैं. Okay, that's why many historians reject Arthashastra as a source of Mauryan history. The second major source of the Mauryan history, it is the Megasthenes Indica, but there is a problem with Megasthenes Indica also. Its original text is lost, and whatever is written in the history writing of Arrian, Strabo and Pliny. उनको मिक्स करके हमें इंफॉर्मेशन मिल जाती है. These two could be the primary source, okay, along with if we see the archaeological, so here we see Ashoka's inscriptions. They are the most important source of Mauryan history because they are undisputed. They are written on the command of the king itself. तो वहां पे कुछ भी ऊपर नीचे नहीं हुआ. But initially when we were trying to understand about Mauryas, बहुत प्रॉब्लम थी because अर्थशास्त्र बहुत बाद में डिस्कवर हुआ था. Whatever information was there in the Indica, we did not know if we have to accept it or reject it. क्या सही है और क्या गलत है. ठीक है. Side by side, we also had like these edicts of Ashoka. They became only readable once the Brahmi script was deciphered. And who deciphered it? James Prinsip in 1837-38. वहाँ पर उन्होंने उसको decipher कर लिया. And these edicts eventually became one of the most important source of history. Okay. 1915 में पूरा फाइनल कंटेक्स्ट आया कि जो देवनम पियादासी हैं वो कौन है? अशोका है. तो बहुत लंबा टाइम लगा हमें, है ना, कि इवन देवर ब्राह्मी स्क्रिप्ट वर डिसिफर्ड. पूरी कंक्लूसिव ना कौन से ईयर में आई? 1915 के आसपास में आई है ना. इसको आप ध्यान रखना, कभी प्रीलिम्स से पूछ सकते हैं. लेटर देयर वर सम अदर सोर्सेज आल्सो, लाइक वी हैव दिस जूनागढ़ इंस्क्रिप्शंस ऑफ रुद्रदमन व्हिच टॉक्स अबाउट हाउ द सुदर्शन लेक वाज बिल्ट ड्यूरिंग द टाइम्स ऑफ Mauryas, which provide information about the geographical extent of the Mauryan Empire. तो ये भी एक important inscription है for the case of Mauryas. Then we have other sources like Mudra Rakshasa. This Mudra Rakshasa has been written by Vishakadatta, which provide information how the Mauryan Empire was initially created and what kind of steps were taken by Chanakya or the Kautilya and what steps were taken by Chandragupta Mauryas, how this was created. This is an important text, but again this is more of a secondary source. It is not contemporary nature, बहुत बाद में लिखा गया है. So once we are able to understand all of this, we are able to understand okay कि भाई Mauryas जो है उसकी history बहुत important है for India as a nation. However, at the same time there are so many gaps at different places. When we use the Greek sources जो हम इंडिया का यूज करते हैं तो हमें उनका ट्रांसलेट करना पड़ता है. द वर्ड यूज फॉर चंद्रगुप्त मौर्य इट इज सेंड्रोकोटस, ये वर्ड यूज किया गया है स्पेसिफिकली उसके लिए. ठीक है. एंड इंस्पायर्ड बाय अलेक्जेंडर ही लेड मेनी रिवोल्ट्स अगेंस्ट नंदास एंड इवेंचुअली ही वाज एबल टू एस्टैब्लिश हिज किंगडम बाय 1321. नो 321 321 और 324. अब वो भी आज तक कंफ्यूज है, 3 साल का डिफरेंस है. तो अब कोई भी आप लिख सकते हो, इट्स नॉट अ प्रॉब्लम. मेगास्थनीज हैज आल्सो रिटन अबाउट पाटलिपुत्र. पाटलिपुत्र के बारे में उन्होंने बहुत सारी कहानियां लिखी हैं. ठीक है. इट टॉक्स अबाउट द कमिटीज, okay, 6 committees of 5 members each which are governing the overall city of Patliputra. So he gives some information about that. He provide information about the overall timetable of king, कि king किस तरीके से govern करता है, कब rest करते हैं, कब क्या करते हैं. So all those information is given here. He also tells us कि भाई जब भी king आते थे there used to be royal procession. He used to come on पालकी, है ना, पहले क्वीन पे आप बैठ के आते थे, पूरा अच्छे से स्वागत होता था उनका. Okay. He also provide information about that even women used to have role of बॉडीगार्ड्स, उनको भी बॉडीगार्ड्स का प्रोफेशन में इंक्लूड करते थे. ही नेवर स्लीप्स इन द सेम बेडरूम फॉर 2 नाइट्स. अब ये पता नहीं है ना कि हर रोज अब ना नेवर स्लीप्स इन द सेम बेडरूम फॉर 2 नाइट्स. तो ऐसा क्या कर रहे थे वो, यू डू नॉट नो, है ना. कितना इवेंचुअली उनके पास एक्सपेंस था, कितना बड़ा महल था. बट ठीक है, कुछ ना कुछ तो एग्जैजरेशन है ही मेगास्थनीज की राइटिंग्स में. तो जब भी हम कोई आउटसाइडर्स का टेक्स्ट को रीड करते हैं, वी हैव टू इंश्योर what is the correctness or what is the problematic thing. कुछ चीज तो उन्होंने सिर्फ कहानियों के लिए लिख रखी है. But again, Chandragupta is considered as a great ruler, advised and aided by Chanakya. Chanakya was also known by the name Kautilya, and he played a very important role in overthrowing the Nandas. So this is the initial creation of the kingdom of Maurya, which will eventually become an empire. After him, we see the coming of Bindusar. Bindusar, he again ruled for roughly 25 years. Very capable leader. We do not know much about his reign. ज़्यादा हमें पता नहीं है because ना तो कोई standard text है उनके बारे में. Okay, and that's why eventually we see go towards Ashoka. So till 272 BC, Bindusara ruled. Then there was a war of succession for 4 years roughly because Ashoka came to power in 268. He killed his 99 brothers. है ना, जो भी पता नहीं अब इतने brother कहाँ से आए. It's a figure of speech or reality, nobody knows. If it's a reality, it's a chaos. 264 for 4 years. Eventually, the war of succession goes on, and it comes into the picture by 268. Majority of the Mauryan history, it is linked on 2-3 parts itself. एक हम उनके administration की बात करते हैं. What kind of administration was built by the Mauryas? Second, it is about Ashoka. Ashoka, his rule of Dhamma. What was Dhamma all about? That has been asked multiple times. Okay, तो ये दो सबसे ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है. थर्ड एरिया आता है इनका आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चर का. तो एक बार ब्रीफली ओवरव्यू करते हैं सबको. लाइक इफ यू सी अशोका, ही इज द मोस्ट फेमस रूलर ऑफ एंशिएंट इंडिया विदाउट अ डाउट. He after the war of Kalinga, eventually he even transformed into Buddhism. That is the reality of this. Okay, but what is more important? There was a person who has written this book. Please remember his name, Charles Allen. Okay, he has written this book which is known as The Search of India's Lost Emperor. This was the first connected book which gave lot of information about Ashoka. तो ये कभी भी आपका प्रीलिम्स में पूछ सकते हैं. It provides a comprehensive account of Ashoka. Please remember this. नहीं, फैक्चुअल चीजें देखो प्रीलिम्स में बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. मेंस में तो फिर भी इतना काम नहीं आएगा, बट दिस इज समथिंग व्हिच इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज अंडरस्टैंडिंग अशोका रिक्वायर्ड अ लॉट. इनिशियली हमें पता ही नहीं चल रहा था कौन है देवनम पियादासी. धीरे धीरे पता चला. इनिशियली तो ये भी कहते थे कि देवनम पियादासी वाज अ रूलर फ्रॉम श्रीलंका, and India was under the rule of Sri Lanka for around 200 years. This was the story. Okay, but with the period of time we realized कि नहीं अपना ही है, श्रीलंका से नहीं है. Then, as we already know, the most defining campaign of the life of Ashoka, that was the campaign of Kalinga. And he has written in this that roughly 1.5 lakh people, they were imprisoned, more than 1 lakh people, they died, and that changed his heart. तो एक पूरा extract NCERT में दिया हुआ है इन्होंने, ठीक है. 8 years after becoming king, I conquered Kalinga. इनकी पूरी हुई writings हैं. About 1 lakh and half, 150,000, they were captured, and more than 1 lakh people, they were killed. This filled me with sorrow. है ना? क्यों? Why? So he gives a reason why do we have to do this. We can have some alternative methods of empire creation. That's why he shift from Bheri Ghosha or conquest by war, shift towards Dhamma Ghosha, conquest by culture. तो ये यहाँ से shift होता है इनका. Okay, and that is a very big text which is given here. Then he gives his message also. Okay, whenever we talk about Dhamma, Dhamma is not a religion. Okay, Dhamma has been interpreted as a religion by many historians. It is not a religion. It is more of a code of conduct. कि आपको क्या करना चाहिए और क्या नहीं करना. जब सिविल सर्विस ज्वाइन करोगे, there will be a code of ethics, ना, code of conduct जो आप लोग को फॉलो करना पड़ेगा. क्या करना है, क्या नहीं करना है. जैसे करप्शन नहीं करना है. That is written in the code of conduct. Anyway, being gentle with slaves and servants, respecting one's elders, treating all creature with compassion, giving gifts to Brahmins and monks. It is both wrong. अब ये exactly UPSC ने आपका पूछा था prelims में. It is both wrong to praise one's own religion or criticize others. Each one should respect the other's religion. If one praises one's own religion while criticizing another's, one is actually doing greater harm to one's own religion. So this is something, ये exact आप lines याद कर लीजिए. You will write religious tolerance. Topper is writing this. किसको marks मिलेंगे? Because this is his idea of religious tolerance. Okay, religious tolerance, it's very neutral. कुछ समझ नहीं आता उससे कि इसका मीनिंग क्या था. That's why at times we need to remember exact meaning. देखो हिस्ट्री में अगर ऑथेंटिसिटी लेके आनी है तो we need to write like we are writing the primary source. Primary source से लिख रहे हैं. That's why such terms you have to remember. In fact, our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, he also commented on his edict. He said that his edicts still speak to us in a language we can understand and we can still learn much more from them. So when you do conclusions on Ashoka, the importance of his edicts, you can utilize the words of Jawaharlal Nehru. That could be utilized. But anyway, it talks about many things which should be done. He even says that all the rituals, like see, isko read hi karo. People perform a variety of rituals when they fall ill, when their children get married, when the children are born, when they go on a journey. These rituals are not useful. If instead people observe other practices, this would be more fruitful. What are these other practices? These are the practices he talks about. Be kind to each other, okay? Don't criticize each other's religion. Have respect for slaves, brahmanas, all those things. This is what Dhamma is. His edicts, as we have already discussed, they are found in multiple parts of India. Only the South India part that does not have his edicts. Edicts are of different types: major edict, minor edict. These edicts are also divided into two parts. One are the pillar edicts, the other are the rock edicts. Then we also have some cave inscriptions also. Okay, like Barabar and Nagarjuni, we have the cave inscription also. So overall, अगर हम देखें कितना edict है? Around 33 edicts है, which includes 14 major, 2 from the Kalinga ones itself, 7 pillar edicts and minor edicts. Major rock edicts जो है, as we can see, they are all the way up to Afghanistan. Afghanistan तक पहुंच जाते हैं ये, ठीक है? If we go towards the east, धौली चौगुड़ा यहाँ तक मिलता है. Go towards the south, southern most में हमें क्या मिलता है? येरागुड़ी, which is in the आंध्र प्रदेश region. अगर वेस्टर्न मोस्ट में है तो अगर अफगानिस्तान का देखें तो कांधार है, इंडिया का देखेंगे तो इट इज गोइंग टू बी गिरनार. Okay, so this is how you can see the various areas which were under the control of the Mauryas. These are very very important because lot of information is conveyed through them. Okay, minor pillar inscription हमें बहुत जगह मिलता है, ठीक है? Found in Lumbini also, Amravati also, बहुत जगह पे हमें मिलता है. Geographical studies, and there is also mentioning of the some of the chiefdoms like Cholas, Pandyas, Satyaputra and Keralputras. All of them they are mentioned in the Ashoka's inscriptions. ये सब कुछ इन्होंने इसके अंदर mention किया हुआ है. अगर हम इनके बिलीफ सिस्टम को समझना चाहते हैं तो मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग वुड बी द एडिक्ट इटसेल्फ, सो दैट प्रोवाइड इन्फॉर्मेशन अबाउट righteousness, justice, etc. All of this is mentioned here. Okay, under this, as we have already discussed, we had the third Buddhist council, and after that the various areas, okay, they were finally defined, and after that eventually he started his process of the spread of even Buddhist ideas. Okay, so that was done. In fact, he sent his own son as well as daughter to Sri Lanka with the sapling which was sourced from the source or the original Bodhi tree. तो वहां से लेके, in fact this was the question asked to me in the interview, tell me about the name of son and daughter of Ashoka who went to Sri Lanka. तो भाई याद कर लो, ऐसा नहीं कि सारे फैक्ट्स बकवास होते हैं, ठीक है. So Mahinda and Sanghmitra, these two, they were sent. So that's why what do we see? There's a lot of zeal within Ashoka to spread the main ideas of Buddhism, and that's how Sri Lanka eventually, okay, it also became a Buddhist country even till today. He ruled till 232 BC, okay, and this was a period of great change. Why great change? Because for the first time we have a ruler which is telling his subjects what they should do, and not by force, through persuasion. He is talking about a paternalistic state. Paternalistic state means he is thinking like a parent, that what is good for his subjects, and that is something which we see very few times in Indian history. Like he as well as Akbar, these two are the major personalities if we see in Indian history. That's why Ashoka is something which is very, very important, and that is something which we see. But the major problem was that after his death in 232 BC, the whole empire crumbled by 187 BC. 187 BC the empire goes into the end, and that's why there's a very big debate on Ashoka. Can we consider Ashoka responsible for decline of Mauryas? There is a story with respect to this, okay, that since he was a pacifist means who was not a believer in the use of weapon after the end of the Kalinga war, this led to the decline of the military capabilities of the Mauryas, and that's how when the Indo-Greek, Shakas, Kushanas, they started the process of invasion of northwest India, the whole army of the Mauryas went down, and eventually their military commander Pushyamitra Shunga, he killed the last king Bridrat, and that was the end of Mauryan Empire. ठीक है, तो ये पूरी कहानी इसके ऊपर. Now we see their overall क्या क्या major areas of concern थे: tax collection, justice administration, internal security, external defense. In fact, there is a state model which was given by the Kautilya itself, known as Saptang Rajya. There are 7 major limbs of a state. उनमें यही सब चीजें वो मिला के आती थी. ठीक है, बाद में डिस्कस करेंगे कुछ स्पेसिफिक चीजें. ब्यूरोक्रेसी का बहुत बड़ा रोल था. देयर वर 27 अध्यक्षास हु यूज्ड टू कंट्रोल द इकोनॉमी एज वेल एज द प्रोसेस ऑफ मिलिट्री बिल्डअप. तो पूरी मिलिट्री को भी अध्यक्ष कंट्रोल करता है एज वेल एज द इकोनॉमी. सैलरीज काफी ज्यादा थी, तो इन्होंने स्पेसिफिकली मेंशन किया हुआ है अराउंड 48,000 पानास. दिस यूज्ड टू बी द सैलरी ऑफ चीफ मिनिस्टर, पुरोहित एंड आर्मी कमांडर. सोल्जर्स के लिए कितना था? 500. सो दैट वाज द स्केल. जैसे हमारा होता ना स्केल होता है स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम द लोवेस्ट लेवल टू द चीफ सेक्रेटरी या फिर कैबिनेट सेक्रेटरी की रैंक तक. तो इनका ये है 500 रुपए से लेके 48,000 तक सैलरी का स्केल. अर्थशास्त्र, एज ऑल ऑफ अस नो, ये वर्ड कभी मत भूलना है, इट्स अ प्रेस्क्रिप्टिव टेक्स्ट. डॉक्टर का प्रेस्क्रिप्शन होता है ना, वो बाद में फॉलो होगा नहीं होगा, दैट्स अ डिफरेंट थिंग. कि अच्छा ये है, ये होना चाहिए. दैट्स व्हाई इट्स अ प्रेस्क्रिप्टिव टेक्स्ट. It talks about that what should be, how a state should be created. But the biggest problem with this is we do not know exactly if this was followed by the Mauryas. That's why always remember it's a prescriptive text, and this cannot give us 100% surety कि जो इसमें लिखा है वो सच है. In fact, many historians even reject it. They say that it belongs to a later era. It doesn't belong to Mauryas. But अब हमारे पास जो best odds है हम accept कर लेते हैं एक level तक. Okay. Now, if you see administration, they were having a council of ministers. Patliputra was directly administered as told by the Megasthenes. Provinces, they were administered by governors. Majority of the governors, they used to be royal princes. Like before becoming the king, Ashoka himself, he was the governor of the areas of, कौन से areas में थे? उज्जैन में भी थे as well as of तक्षशिला. दोनों के गवर्नर रह चुके थे. So that's why royal princes, they were having very important role. And then tax collection was very important, and they were having a specific large staff to collect it. District level पे officers थे, स्थानिका as well as गोपा. स्थानिका district level पे देखते थे, and just below him used to be gopas who used to have control over a number of villages. तो इस तरीके से इनका एक पूरा स्ट्रक्चर बन गया. सेंटर पे काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर हो गया, State provincial level पे there used to be governor, again guided by the council of ministers. District level पे there used to be sthanikas, and below sthanika there used to be gopas, who used to have a number of villages under their control, and villages में थोड़ी autonomy थी. Sources of revenue में number one revenue कौन सा होगा हर बार? Agriculture. Naturally agriculture is there, and then there were other taxes on various economic activities. Some areas there was the state monopoly, जैसे कि textile था, mining था, they were under the direct control of state itself. जैसे आज भी अगर हम देखेंगे कुछ कुछ state monopoly है, atomic energy, railways, ठीक है, आज भी किसके कंट्रोल में? गवर्नमेंट के अंडर है. तो ऐसे उनके पास भी कुछ कुछ एरियाज थे, सम सब्जेक्ट्स वर अंडर देयर डायरेक्ट कंट्रोल. टैक्सेस वर ऑन क्रॉप्स, क्राफ्ट, है ना, इवन जितना भी कॉमर्स है सब पे कुछ ना कुछ टैक्सेस था. विद रिस्पेक्ट टू जस्टिस, टू टाइप्स ऑफ कोर्ट्स वर देयर, वन फॉर सिविल, द सेकंड फॉर क्रिमिनल. सिविल के लिए जो थे उसको धर्मस्थीय कोर्ट्स बोलते थे, दे यूज्ड टू डील विद द सिविल लॉ. विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द क्रिमिनल लॉ देयर यूज्ड टू बी कंटका शोधना, दे यूज्ड टू बी द criminal laws. So ये दो तरीके के होते हैं. But anyway, there was the highest court of justice that again rests with the king. It was not like today, separation of executive, legislature and judiciary. At that time, all these functions were having fusion, and eventually that's how the overall system of Mauryas worked. अशोका के धम्मा की जब हम बात करते हैं, ऑलरेडी हमने ऊपर ऊपर से बात कर लिया है. अगर याद करने का मन हो कि exactly which information comes from which specific part of the Ashoka's edict, तो वो भी आप करना चाहो तो कर सकते हो. Like he was advising his officers to go on tour every 5 years so that they can see to what extent Dhamma has been established itself among the people, कितना लोग उसको follow कर रहे हैं. That is in the major rock edict 3. In the next major rock edict, okay, Kalinga edict, he even talks about that men were not imprisoned or tortured without good reason. ऐसा होना ही नहीं चाहिए. Then effective ruler need to be fully informed. This information comes from the major rock edict 6. तो ऐसे से बहुत सारे information है, ठीक है, चाहे तो आप याद कर सकते हो. All religions should coexist. Rock edict 7 as well as 12, showing respect for all living beings, that is also mentioned. तो बहुत सारी चीजें इन्होंने अलग अलग एडिक्ट में मेंशन की हुई है. जब हम आंसर राइटिंग करते हैं ना, सपोज क्वेश्चन आ रहा धम्मा पे, and if you're writing like this in this rock edict this information is there, that gives a very unique impact on the outcome. That's why रट्टाफिकेशन देखो थोड़ा सा तो चाहिए होगा एग्जाम में अच्छे मार्क्स लेके आने के लिए. समझना एक लेवल तक ठीक है, बट अगर आपको और ऊपर मार्क्स चाहिए तो उसके थ्रू आएंगे. एग्रीकल्चर वाज द बैकबोन, ओके, दे वर हैविंग 2 स्पेसिफिक क्रॉप्स एवरी ईयर, जो हम ऑलरेडी बात कर चुके हैं, नथिंग न्यू अबाउट इट. क्राफ्ट्समैनशिप वाज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, इट वाज हैविंग वेरियस काइंड्स ऑफ ट्रेडिशन लाइक स्पिनिंग, वीविंग, ठीक है. सिल्क वाज आल्सो नोन एंड दे यूज्ड टू कॉल इट चाइनीज सिल्क. जैसे बहुत सारी इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज थी. Many regions were very important, like Bengal region was very very prominent. Metal work included iron smelting, woodwork was important, okay. Then stonework was also prominent. Luxury goods like perfumes, carved ivory, etc. they were also imported and exported. Other products include drug, medicine, pottery. So economy was relatively on the vibrant side, and they were having 27 adakshas, and there was a lot of control on the economy of Mauryas. That's why one of the reason why we call Mauryas as centralized. Why? Because economic activities were very much controlled. जैसे इंडिया में है ना इंस्पेक्टर राज, every specific industry is getting controlled by the state. Similarly, they are also having bureaucrats for every small, minor or major economic activity, and that is one of the reason why we call it centralized. Hereditary professions जो थे वो they used to work. Urban centers were important for the overall production. Guild system, this became very prominent. Guild system means they were craft organizations. Okay, and they used to have their own sanctity. Like आज की डेट में हमारे पास ना फिक्की है ना. What does these organization do? क्या करते हैं? They set standards for their own specific craft. उसके लिए standards set करते हैं. The same work was done by the guilds, and they have a head. The head is known as Pramukh. Okay, and even Jyeshtha, who used to be like an elder craftsman. Institutional identity was there, and they also used to be dispute resolution. They could take the final decision with respect to their own established orders. Trade, as we have seen, trade was very important, diversified, and different sets of different sets of articles they were traded. Markets of different types. Political stability was there, because देखो जितनी ज़्यादा political stability होगी उतना ज़्यादा क्या होगा, economy vibrant होगा. That was there. Transportation के लिए they used rivers, roads. Sea trade was also prominent. Trade organization has these various kinds of merchant groups. So all these used to work. Government role was to creation of infrastructure, regulation as well as market control. And when we see a traded goods, it was having both elements of internal as well as foreign trade. तो ये बहुत ही बेसिक चीजें हैं, यूपीएससी इतना इकोनॉमी पे क्वेश्चन पूछता भी नहीं है। उसका मेजर ध्यान तीन ही चीजों पे है। पहला, इट इज विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द सोर्सेज ऑफ द मौर्यस। सोर्सेज में आपका मेगास्थनीज का सोर्स आता है, अर्थशास्त्र आता है, एंड अशोकास इंस्क्रिप्शन। ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दीज सोर्सेज टेल अस इज इट सेंट्रलाइज्ड और डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड। 2-3 साल से तो यही क्वेश्चन आ रहा है। सेकंड इज अबाउट धम्मा। धम्मा के ऊपर क्वेश्चन बहुत बार आ चुका है। नेचर ऑफ धम्मा, impact of dhamma, why did he want this to become successful, all those sort of questions are coming regularly. Okay, coins वगैरह ये बहुत basic है। they were having silver coins, again the punch marked coins continued, there was no major change, they were known as pana, and these punch marked coins have been found। specific shapes रही है इन coins की, ठीक है, जैसे कि arched hill symbol on rivers और the कृषापना बिंदुसरा, ये सब इनकी shapes हमें मिली है punch marked coins में of the Mauryas। इवन क्रेसेंट हिल करके जो एक सिंबल होता है विच वी कैन फाउंड ऑन द मौर्यास। डिक्लाइन के बहुत सारे फैक्टर्स हैं मौर्यास के। सबसे बड़ा फैक्टर तो यही है कि आफ्टर अशोका देयर वाज नो मेजर पावरफुल पर्सनालिटी, एंड एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ दिस व्हेन यू हैव सच अ बिग एम्पायर, इफ स्ट्रॉन्ग पर्सनालिटीज आर नॉट गोइंग टू कम, इवेंचुअली वी विल सी अ डिक्लाइन। दैट इज द मेजर रीजन व्हाई वी सी द डिक्लाइन ऑफ दिस। एक और इसका मेजर रीजन है जो हम सब लोग नहीं समझते, दैट इज व्हेन द इन्वेजन्स वर हैपनिंग द चाइनीज स्टार्टेड बिल्डिंग द ग्रेट वॉल ऑफ चाइना, बट इंडियंस दे वर completely oblivion, or the Mauryans they were oblivious to this. That's why when the invasion started from the Indo-Greeks, okay, that may have led to a situation in which the army was becoming dissatisfied, and probably the main reason why Pushyamitra Shunga he killed the last king could have been this reason, because it is often said by some of the historians that since they were followers of Buddhism, they were not a believer in violence, and when they were getting defeated, people like Pushyamitra Shunga they become very angry with this, and eventually he killed Dridrath, and that's how we see the beginning of Shunga dynasty। वहां से वो स्टार्ट हो जाती है। तो बहुत सारे फैक्टर्स हैं इसके। एक और इसका मेजर फैक्टर ये है that initially in India nobody knew the how to create an empire, but this knowledge started getting transferred to the peripheral areas, and with the period of time they established their own empires. Like we see in the Deccan area, we see the rise of Satavahanas, in North India Shungas, and in the northwest where the invasion started, initially we see the rule of Indo-Greeks, then we see Shakas, and finally we see that of Kushanas, and in the South India we see the beginning of the times of the Sangam age. Okay, in the Sangam age we see the rise of Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. So the whole of India it got divided into various state systems with the period of time, which was initially a monopoly of the areas of Magadha, eventually got known to everybody, and that's why this peripheral knowledge was responsible eventually for the decline of Mauryas. Okay, there are many historians like Romila Thapar. Romila Thapar says that there was lack of nationalism in Mauryas, but देखो nationalism is a very modern concept. We cannot use today's concept on the past, है ना, कि nationalism नहीं था। ऐसे तो nationalism 1857 में भी नहीं था, तो Mauryas के टाइम पे क्या expectation लेके जाओगे, ठीक है? So that's why that is not considered. There are few like people like Harprasad Shastri who say that Ashoka was responsible for the decline. They say that he was a pacifist. इसने कहानी खत्म कर दी पूरी, है ना? He was not taking too much of focus on military, and if military is weak, it can be defeated by the outsiders, like it is done by the Indo-Greeks. तो बहुत सारे historians का different viewpoint है। आगे इन्होंने बस यही समझाया कि after that we see the rise of Shakas, then we see the rise of Kushanas. In the Deccan area we see the rise of Satavahanas. Okay, and after the Satavahanas, okay, eventually in the north we'll see the rise of Guptas, and Deccan we see the rise of Vakatakas. Okay, तो वो उन्होंने information दिया हुआ यहाँ पे बस यही है। In the South India initially we see that of the Sangam age, which includes Cholas, Cheras as well as Pandyas, but eventually we see the rise of Pallavas, and after Pallavas we see the rise of Cholas in that area. In the Deccan area, after the Vakatakas, after they will decline, we'll see the rise of Chalukyas, and then we'll see the rise of Rashtrakutas. So एक बार मौर्यस खत्म होता है ना, डायनेस्टीज बम्बार्ड करने लग जाती हैं, है ना। अभी तक बहुत आसान चल रहा है, शांति भरा, बाकी कल देखेंगे, ठीक है। दिस इज व्हाट वी वर रिक्वायर्ड टू डिस्कस टुडे। आई होप यू कैन रिमेंबर ऑल दीज थिंग्स। ओके, एनसीईआरटी से हमने बहुत तरीके से क्राफ्ट किए मैक्सिमम चीजें, ये आपको आई होप याद है। 6th century BC अगेन वी सी द सेकंड अर्बनाइजेशन विद इन नेक्स्ट फ्यू इयर्स, रूलर्स ऑफ मगधा कंसोलिडेट powers one dynasty after the other. By 327-25 invasion of Alexander of Macedonia, 321 accession of Chandragupta Maurya, देन वी सी द रेन ऑफ अशोका, देन फाइनली एंड ऑफ मौर्यन एम्पायर। हर जगह डेट्स थोड़ी सी 1-2 साल आगे पीछे, उसमें आप परेशान मत हुई। 184 भी लिखते हैं, 185 एनसीईआरटी ने लिखा, 187 भी लिखते हैं, सब चलता है। कौन सा हमारा बर्थडे है ना, सब चलता है, बिकॉज नोबडी नोज द एग्जैक्ट डेट, किस दिन क्या हुआ है इन एंशिएंट इंडिया, इट्स नॉट मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री। एंड फाइनली 200 BC to roughly 100 BC, we see the Indo-Greeks rule in northwest, Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas in South India, and Satavahanas in the Deccan. So once they will decline, different parts of India will have different set of ruling dynasties. Okay, so this is the end for today. Tomorrow we'll meet at the same time. But tomorrow first we'll start with South India, because in South India we have not covered anything. जैसे हमने वैदिक पीरियड कवर कर लिया, वहां पे हमने अभी तक क्या कवर नहीं किया, मेगालिथ। तो विल कवर मेगालिथ, देन विल कवर संगम एज, देन विल कवर द पल्लवास एज वेल एज द चोलास, है ना। तो वो हम कल एक साथ कवर कर लेंगे। एंड साइड बाय साइड इफ विल हैव टाइम टुमारो इटसेल्फ, देन विल मूव फॉरवर्ड विद द पोस्ट मौर्यन पीरियड एंड देन इवेंचुअली द गुप्ताज एंड हर्षवर्धन। इतना ही हमें एंशिएंट इंडिया में करना है। देन इवेंचुअली विल गो टुवर्ड्स द मिडिएवल। सम ऑफ यू हैव ऑलरेडी सबमिटेड द असाइनमेंट, है ना। जिन्होंने नहीं किया है प्लीज डू इट, because mostly on day after tomorrow or Thursday we'll have a class of answer writing. तो आंसर राइटिंग के ऊपर तभी कर पाएंगे when you write something first. सिर्फ कहानी सुन के वापस जाने से आंसर राइटिंग नहीं आती है। So please write some answers. The assignment is already uploaded. I hope देखा होगा आप लोगों ने, असाइनमेंट है ऑलरेडी, नहीं है तो आंसर शीट लेके चले जाइए यहाँ पे। ऑनलाइन स्टूडेंट्स प्लीज आप डाउनलोड करिए, लिखिए, सबमिट करिए, इट विल बी चेक्ड, है ना। सम स्टूडेंट्स हैव डन it, so their copies are getting checked. Those who of you who are not doing it so far, please write it. Still there is opportunity. लिख लीजिए, ठीक है। That's it for today. We'll meet tomorrow.